Welcome, my lords, to the Weller and Comforts podcast. I'm Sam.
And I'm Seth.
Thank you for joining us on the Walls of Isengard as we explore the many works of Tolkien and discuss life. We're glad to have you as part of the fellowship, as there's no telling where we'll be swept off to. Especially today, we have another guest on the podcast, Dr. Damion. Super excited to have him on the podcast. So we met, if you've listened to the podcast, the last couple episodes we talked about our LEP3 party, long expected party that I got to attend with our friends over at Up Talking Tolkien podcast. And I got to meet Dr. Damion. We got to hang out and talk over a couple pints, and it was just very obvious that we have a lot in common. I'm not an orthopedic surgeon like him, and so I'm definitely not nearly as smart, but just our love for Tolkien, the reverence for his work, but then also just some life stuff and some similar faith, and so I'm really excited to have him on the podcast today. We're going to be talking about fatherhood in Middle-earth, which will be interesting. We all have kind of picked a few different fathers within Tolkien's works, and I'll be talking a little bit about Tolkien's own story as a father and through the lens of his letters that he wrote to some of his sons. But obviously, like always, before we do that, we're going to babble like Butterbur for a little bit. So I'm actually going to jump in with Dr. Damion. Would you mind just sharing with us a little bit about who you are and why you love Tolkien?
Sure, absolutely. No, my name is Damion Harris. I'm basically just a huge Tolkien fan. Goes back right around 24 years, and I can tell you right where it started. My wife and I, we would go and we would visit our brother and sister-in-law, which would be her sister and her husband. And one night we were sitting there, and we would always watch movies, and then he and I would go play ping pong afterwards.
Nice.
Well, he comes in, he sits down. Yeah, he comes in, he sits down, he drops a movie in, and we ask, well, what's on? And he looks over and he goes, well, Lord of the Rings. And well, about this time, and I'll be honest with you, I'm going through college, I'm going through, medical school, things like that. I haven't looked at a different book other than a medical book in a long time. And I just kind of turned to my wife and I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And thinking, well, this is going to be horribly boring and looking forward to getting home. And I can tell you that immediately when the prologue came on, it was just as if a switch was turned and both of us were just immediately caught. And I can tell you, I'm not sure I blinked throughout the rest of the time that the movie went on. So that right there was my initial exposure to Tolkien, really. And sure, I'd heard of the book, but or the books, but I'd never really gotten into them, with sports and school and things like that. It just hadn't been anything that I had read. And, but I can tell you that I read the entire Two Towers over my pediatric rotation in medical school, which basically means that I can't take care of my children if they get sick right now. So, but it's become just something part of our entire household. My oldest son is reading the Silmarillion now, and he's home from college, and basically we just spend hours talking about nothing but the Silmarillion at this point. And my youngest son, whenever we go out and we go for walks, bike rides, things like that, he just asks me questions about Lord of the Rings, and he calls us Team Loader. And so that's kind of what we do. And, Sam, you met my middle son at LEP3. It was held in Mount Vernon, Ohio, where my middle son goes to school. And he came, hung out with us for a while. So Sam got to meet him, and he got to see some of Sam's tattoos that came along with that. So lots of good stuff, but that's my initial exposure.
Yeah, I wanted you to share this because I didn't actually tell Seth this story because I mentioned it on the last podcast. I don't know if you heard it, but I was about to tell the story for you, and I was like, it's not my story to tell. I think this is awesome. It made me smile. But if you feel comfortable to doing so, why don't you share about the tattoos specifically, because that was awesome.
Yeah, no, this is great because we're all at Lep 3. We're all just kind of hanging out, and Sam comes walking in, and he's got this new tattoo on him, and I look and I was like, oh, that's cool, and I thought for years that, well, maybe I'd get a tattoo. And the two things that I'm probably the most passionate about are Tolkien and fly fishing. So of those things, I've thought multiple times, but it just have never pulled the trigger. So my middle son, who goes to school there at Mount Vernon, he comes over and he sees that and he's like, Dad, let's go get a matching tattoo.
Nice.
And I, at first I was like, all right, you realize that your mom's going to kill both of us, right? and he's like, all right, come on, let's just do it. Let's just do it. And I knew that if I was going to get one, like I said, Tolkien or fly fishing, and this seemed like the most reasonable time to go after it. So we go uptown, we look through, we figure out what we like, and we got matching tattoos, kind of up in our upper trapezial area, which I'm using medical terms, sorry. But same place, same exact tattoo, and I can tell you, I was more nervous about that than going in and doing my first surgery, I think, just because, you're thinking, all right, am I actually doing this? Am I gonna go through with it? And when he got done, I couldn't wimp out. So I laid down on the table and got it done. And got to sit there and listen to him ask me if I was getting teardrops on the ground as it was happening.
That's amazing. So that begs the question, and maybe it's something special just between you and your son, but what is it? What'd you get?
We actually got the shards of Narsil.
Nice.
And it's the shards of Narsil, and it's surrounded by the One Ring in the Elven Tangwar script. So it's
nice.
It's very cool. Something that we both really. The thing about it is I can look at it and say, you know what, that's something that I would put on my body and not feel bad about it.
That's incredible. I love that.
So it was very, very cool. Yeah.
That's a cool story.
It was a special thing to have.
Now, Sam and I are both quite far behind you in fatherhood. My oldest is 3. My youngest is 11 months. Sam is not far behind us at all. And I know building a relationship with our children to some extent through Tolkien is very important to both of us. And I know this is probably an aside, so if you just have a couple seconds to maybe preach some wisdom onto us, how did you go about exposing your children to Tolkien and making it something fun for them to enjoy and love, as opposed to just like, Dad's crazy, he's going off on his Tolkien talk again? Because it sounds like all 3 of your children enjoy it.
Well, and I'll say this, that I have a daughter also, who's 17. So to kind of put this into context, I have a 21-year-old who is about to graduate from college with a finance degree. My middle boy is in Mount Vernon, Ohio, playing baseball and looking to possibly go into physical therapy. I have a daughter that's 17, junior in high school, and then I have a son that's 10. Nice. And so the thing about it is they're all interested, because I mean, I hate to say it, the fact of the matter is, when Dad comes home at night, if there's a movie that's going on, they know that it's going to be Lord of the Rings. Yeah, like if I've had a bad day or something and I sit down and we've got the whole family there, it's really usually not even a question. They just say, which one? Yeah. Which one are we putting on? And it kind of goes back to Seth. We were talking a little bit earlier before recording, and during medical school, my wife and I had absolutely no money whatsoever, but we did have the extended edition of Lord of the Rings. So every single night when I got home, that's what she and I would do. We would sit there and we would watch Lord of the Rings. And to be quite honest, it basically just followed itself through the childhood of all of our kids. and they were exposed to it extremely early. They saw, all the movies going through the time that I was in residency, going through the time that, I've been in practice now 16 years. And for those, 21 years of starting to watch these, 24 years, excuse me. It's just an exposure, and they see how much passion I have for it. I read the books. I have, if you look up here, you'll see I have all the letters. We have all the different things that go along that Tolkien's written, and it's just, for me, in a way, it's kind of an escape, but it's a fun escape, and it's something that it's easy to pass on to your children because it's fantasy, it's fun, it's an entire world in a legendarium, and from that they've all just sort of fallen into it and all really enjoy it.
That's incredible.
Sorry, I just gotta say, my kids have a head start because their namesake. I got Baron and Elisar, so they
Exactly.
they don't have a choice. Either that or they're really gonna hate it. I don't know. We'll see. But the book that you got us, Seth, John Ronald's Dragons, Bear loves it, and that's been a good way to kind of slowly expose them into it. And so anytime like we see dragons or anything like that, I'll be like, is that Smaug? He just like, it's really fun. So, but that's great. I appreciate you sharing that, man. That's cool.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, let's for sake of time, because we got a lot of really good content to get to. But Seth, any quick just life updates for you? Nothing much for us. I mean, we're just chugging along. Both kids were sick for a week. Bear was spewing out of both ends for a little while. The 103 fever for a couple days, but today both have been fine for the most part. So other than my wife being a trooper and having to deal with that the last week or so as I've been work, nothing too new to report for us. But what about you, Seth?
It's just been, it's been busy. Benjamin had a pretty rough stretch of couple weeks where we had an appointment for his allergist because first time we gave him milk and eggs, he kind of got a pretty bad rash. And so we had an allergist appointment. Turns out, yes, he's allergic to casein and whey, and then also eggs and potentially peanut butter. And then he ended up getting sick, going to the ED about a week before a circumcision revision, got antibiotics, got the surgery done. I don't know if it was an infection of that or a virus, but he got another infection or something where he had a fever of 103.5, and for like 5 days we kept going back and forth. And he's a trooper. He just is along for the ride, but like he was having a rough time for about 2 weeks. We probably went into urgent care because of course it's over Thanksgiving weekend and everything. And urgent care and ED/surgery appointments, probably like 6 or 7 visits in like a week and a half. So, but like you said, little kids, they bounce back. I mean, he's perfectly fine now, cruising around. Evie and him, we just did bath time tonight, and they played in the bath time together, and it was pretty beautiful. So yeah, other than that, my semester finally ended. 2 more to trudge through, and then on to bigger and better things, hopefully. But yeah, that's us.
I love it. That's it's fun hearing. I mean, obviously, it's a really sucky couple of weeks, but it's fun hearing how you and Amanda just are on each other's team, and the way that you guys work together, I think is awesome. The way that you love those kiddos, I'm thankful that you brought them into this world. I mean, I don't get to see them as much as we would like, but they're awesome. I love seeing the pictures, and especially the one of them looking out the window, looking at the snow, monitoring the situation, as you put it. I loved that. That was great.
Well, I mean,
that was awesome.
I'll just say this real quick, because the topic of today's discussion, once we get into it, is fatherhood and fathers in Middle Earth. And I know, Sam, thank you for saying that, right back at you. And for Damion, it seems like all 3 of us here, our kids are, the pride and joys of our lives. And a good father is very hard to replace, and dare I say essential to a child growing up to be a properly functioning member of society and knowing how to love as they become an adult. So I just want to say shout out to all the dads out there, especially the ones that are nerding out on a what is this, a Thursday night before the weekend.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's great. All right, well, let's jump into Riddles in the Dark real quick. So obviously we've done this a few times now, but we're going to try to guess a character that's on the mind of the other person in the entire legendarium. We get a minute to ask yes or no questions, and then after that minute's up, we get three guesses, rather. Just like old Gollum there, get three guesses. And hopefully you get it right. There's no prize if you get it right. There's no punishment if you get it wrong. But there are bragging rights, and some of us do keep score, like me. I won last week.
It's a trait of a little brother that the one time they win, it becomes scorekeeping.
I'm a little brother, so I understand that. Yeah.
Shout out Damion. Love that. All right. So we'll just start. Seth, you will guess for me. I have my character in my brain, in the old noggin here, and I'm ready to go whenever you are. So I'll let you guess for me. I'll guess from Damion, and the Damion will guess from you.
All right, sounds good. I will hit start on this timer here, and then we will take off. All right, ready, set, and go. Is this character a man?
No.
Is this character an elf?
No.
Is this character a powers, Valar, Maya?
No.
Okay, is it a dwarf?
No.
Is it a ent?
No.
Is it a eagle?
No.
Okay, is this a first age character?
Yes.
Only first age?
Yes.
Is it a dragon?
No.
Is it a petty dwarf?
No.
Okay. What other creatures are there? Why do you pick these obscure creatures that I'm not even gonna get to guess the creature.
So I can keep winning, obviously.
This is ridiculous. All right, I don't even know.
It's very easy.
I'm sure,
it's
but
very easy.
3 guesses, first age. I don't even know what I would guess.
Come on.
Is it Eru?
Dig deep. No.
Okay. Honestly, I don't know. I give up.
Come on. Think my favorite story. That's easy.
I don't even know which one is yours. I'm kidding. It's
think
Baron
the
and
name
Luthien.
of my first son. Yeah.
Is it Thurin-Gwethil?
No. Oh, that would be good.
Is it Karkaroff?
Yeah.
Bruh. It's the goodest of boys. Who on?
Okay.
Come on, man.
All right.
Dr. Damion had this like 30 seconds ago. He knew right off the bat.
He probably did.
No. As soon as you said first stage and not then, I did go to Huon, but that was I can pretty much guarantee I won't get it right. So
I don't know why I guessed Karkaroff over Huon, to be honest with you.
I know that was surprising.
It's the second week in a row I don't even get to guess because I have no idea like what the creature is because I totally forgot eagles existed last time. So
Yep.
All right.
So I'll guess from you, Damion. You got your character in mind?
Sure.
All right.
When ready,
Timer's up.
We'll go 3, 2, 1, and go.
All right. Is this character in the first stage?
Yes, he is.
Oh, he is. All right. Getting a little extra handicap there
for you.
Is it an elf? Is he an elf?
It is.
Yes. Okay. Is he? Did he sail from Valinor?
No.
Oh, okay. So is he married?
No.
Okay. Huh. Is he in?
I will give this to you. Widower.
Huh.
Widower.
Okay. I think I know who this is.
And
Okay. Time's up. Actually, no. He sailed from Valinor, didn't he?
3 guesses.
I was thinking Fenway.
No, he died in Valinor.
He did. Okay. That's right. He did. Wow. Is it Elrond? He's not first age. Never mind. Is he? Yeah. No, he's not.
Is it
He is first age, but no, it is not Elrond.
Dang it. Seth knows.
I have a pretty good guess. Because I think I know the semantic here. I think
Well, Feanor did sail from Valinor.
I'm telling you, there is a semantic here, Sam, and maybe I kind of put you in the
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. It 100% is a...
When you asked if they sailed, I have a feeling he didn't sail. He walked across the Helcaraxe, is my guess.
Oh.
And he's a widower who I have a pretty good guess on that. But this is your choice. You have one guess left.
Okay. Is it a son of Feanor then?
They all sailed across.
It is not a son of...
Okay. Yeah. Never mind. All right. I don't know. I don't know why it's blanking.
I'm gonna guess Fingolfin.
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Nope. No. It is. Do you want me to just go ahead and say it?
Yeah.
Just go ahead and say it. It's Turgon.
Okay.
Oh.
That was the second one.
Turgon's wife, Elenwe, was the only named death across the Helcaraxe. And she actually fell in, and so did their daughter Idril. And
That's right.
Turgon was able to save Idril, but not Elenwe, who was his wife. So,
dang.
Yep, it's Turgon.
That was a good one.
Turgon.
Very good.
That was a good one. Well done.
Right.
All right, so now I have my character. So you will go ahead and ask yes or no questions, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right, my friend, are you ready?
All right.
And here we go.
Is this a man?
No, not the race of man.
Is this an elf?
No.
Not of the race of men. Okay. Is this an elf?
No.
A Vala?
No.
Okay. A dwarf?
Yes.
Okay. Is this a dwarf of the third age?
Yes.
Okay. Did this dwarf live through any other ages? Or considered to have, meaning...
yeah, I would say no.
The deathless, or...
I would say
no. Was this dwarf a part of the fellowship?
No.
Was this dwarf a part of the group that went to Erebor?
Yes.
Okay. Was this
and
the head of the
three guesses?
Or
three guesses.
Three guesses.
Okay. So I'm gonna go with I got to go with the first guess being the leader of the dwarves, which would be Thorin.
Good guess, but no.
Okay.
You got 12 other guesses.
Next one, I would probably go with my next guess, who I would go with Balin.
No.
Okay. Am I allowed to ask any more questions?
I'll give you one. We'll spot you one.
Okay. Did this dwarf die at the Battle of Five Armies?
No.
Okay. I am going to go with Glowin.
Bingo. Well done.
Nice,
well done.
Nice.
Nicely done. Man, our guest is just mopping us.
I told you he knew his stuff.
I love that though. That it's always fun talking to other people that are as big of nerds, if not bigger than us. I mean, it's cool when somebody else can step on and speak the same language that we do. So well done, my friend.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
All right. So then we have our tidings of the fellowship segment. I haven't really heard anything. I don't think we've gotten any emails or anything recently. But other than just a couple texts here and there from some family members, Scott, Marion, and other folk as well. But we'll jump right into
real quick, Sam. I will just say a shout out to Homestead Padre in the X chat. He's a longtime mutual of mine over on X, Joseph. He just said in the chat, me and my kids have LOTR days where we make LOTR themed foods and watch the movies all day. I think that was from earlier in reference to Damion's story. So we'll consider that tidings of the fellowship. So that's awesome, Joseph.
Perfect.
I can't wait to do that with my kids. I can't wait to do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And you know what, Seth, it is funny. Again, even, I got home yesterday from operating, and again, my oldest son comes in and he's like, okay, so we're talking Fenway here, and and he starts talking about the sons of Fenway, and you know what, it was just you just get so engrossed in it, and you know, when somebody's as geeky to it as you, it just becomes so much fun.
That's awesome. Well, before we move on, I'm just gonna put a little thing in your ear. There's a phrase for that, little something in your ear.
Worm.
Sure. Maybe just turn on, just wear a little lapel mic or something with your son when you're having these conversations, and upload them. I know Sam and I would love to listen. So just something to think about. Something to think about.
We can do that.
All right. So this next section, this is just for kind of our listeners, mom and 17 of mom's alt accounts, to get to know you. So we're going to rapid fire through some questions. These are just really quick yes or no, not yes or no questions, just very short, less than, 15
these are not yes or no questions.
Some of them are,
yeah, sure.
But 15 to 30-second answers. You don't have to elaborate on them, unless you want to. Sam, do you want to go back and forth?
Sure. And there's only 2 yes or no answers out of this
some
entire
of them. That
list.
qualifies as some. It's a fifth of the questions. All right.
All right. Favorite story or excerpt from the entire legendarium? Mine, like I said, Baron Luthien. But what about you?
Baron and Luthien.
Good choice. All right. Favorite book in the trilogy?
Favorite book in the trilogy? Probably I'm going to go with Return of the King.
Ooh, okay. Good choice.
What's your favorite realm or place of residence in Arda?
Oh, that's interesting. I may go with Doriath.
That's a solid choice. I love that call. Yeah, I love that.
I don't like him, but we could talk about that later.
Favorite weapon?
No, I don't disagree. I think there is he is a bit of a prick, but it's between Doriath and Gondolin. So for me, I put those in Middle Earth where we are accessible. Like as a mortal, we would be accessible to one of those places. I don't know if I look at Valinor like Tyrion upon Tuna or anything like that. That sure it'd be bliss, but it wouldn't be a place that we would have access to. So
that's a good point.
Great point.
I like that.
Well thought through.
Yeah, definitely. Favorite weapon?
Aglos.
Ooh, okay.
Gilgalad.
Yes.
Yeah, the spear.
I love that. That's solid. All right, Sam.
That's good. The best or favorite villain in the Legendarium?
Who? Gosh. All right, and I'm going to take some heat for this. But, although I still find him to be probably the most compelling character in the Legendarium, I still look at Feanor a little bit like a villain. And
absolutely,
I may go with him, to be quite honest. Yeah,
I love that, and maybe one of these days we'll have to get another mutual of ours on X. He goes under the anonymous account of High King Feanor, and his whole shtick is Feanor did nothing wrong. we do have an entire podcast of him defending Feanor, but at some point it would be really interesting to hear you two go back and forth on that.
But again, you notice I said I find him the most compelling character in all of the, like, in almost all the legendarium. So I still dig Feanor.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think that he's got a lot of character flaws. So
especially for an elf, which is rare. All right. What is the most epic scene in the legendarium?
I'm going to go with Fingolfin fighting Morgoth after the Dagor Bragollach.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Absolutely. We also have a whole podcast on that too. I agree. Biggest lesson learned from Tolkien, and it could just be like a quick, courage, hope, whatever it might be.
It seems kind of trite, but I kind of like the idea that, it doesn't take great power to produce great things.
Absolutely.
You look at the hobbits and what they do and how they bring about the changes that lead to bringing in the fourth age. So yeah, I'd say that.
I love it.
Yeah, love that.
That's fantastic. All right. Who/what is Tom Bombadil?
I think Tom Bombadil is well, everybody wants to decide whether is it Eru Iluvatar, is it, is he an embodiment of Ea itself? I think I kind of lean towards maybe he's a bit of an embodiment of Ea itself, in that over time, as Melkor or Morgoth put more of his malice into the earth, it kind of shrunk down what Tom Bombadil had control of in the forest there. That's my guess. I really don't know. I've listened to so many YouTube channels and videos and things along those lines that I can't say 100%. I'm not really that smart, but that's how I'm kind of taking it.
I love that. Tolkien himself, I believe, didn't have a direct answer, so that's why it's fun to ask this question.
I still think it's Tolkien's own signature in the story, that he wrote himself into his story, and that's kind of his signature for the entire legendarium. Is like, that's him. It's Tolkien. That's what I'm always going to say. I'm sure it's not true, but I like that. Ooh, good question. Do Balrogs have wings? Or rather, just the Balrog of Morgoth that took Gandalf, because maybe they're different. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, in the book, when you read the paragraph, it does mention wings, and so I'm going with in this instance, winged.
Okay.
So can I
fly? I'm guessing they can probably jump pretty far and glide along pretty easily, but I'm not going to say that they can fly. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe I do remember that it discusses the fact that the wings spread at the time before the fight at the level of the bridge.
All right, I like it.
So somebody check me on that, but I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts?
On that one, I'm trying to remember, because like you said, I don't have it specifically remembered. I believe at some point there was mention of wings, but it was more as in like saying they flew to, like he fled and flew from Beleriand into Middle Earth to hide. But it wasn't directly stating that they had wings. It was more as in just running away. But I don't know. I haven't read it closely enough.
And again, I can just pull up the book that's right next to me, but I thought it was like something about like the shadow of his smoke spread like wings or something like that. I didn't know if it was like a wings, because I do remember what you're talking about, but I don't know if it's like a legit, like literal wings, or if it's like it was Tolkien using that to describe what, it looked like. But in all the depictions, obviously cinematic depictions, there's wings. Yeah. But obviously he can't fly because he fell to his death. So
no, he didn't.
Or rather fell. Yeah. Well, he fell down off the bridge when he could have just flown back up to if he could fly, is what I'm saying.
Fair enough.
I know that it's not how he died, but anyway.
All right, last question before we get into the meat and potatoes here. And I haven't talked to you about this at all, so I'm kind of curious to get your answer, but
I have.
Okay, fair enough. Is Rings of Power a good TV show?
Oh, dear Lord. All right. No, you've just, that, to me, that's the biggest travesty of, anything Tolkien that they possibly could have done. It's really hard for me to watch.
Yes.
No, I'm not a fan of it.
I think that is
they've derelicted the lore horribly, and if they put out another season, they need to fire Payne and McKay and bring in somebody else that knows what they're doing.
Yes, I don't even know if it's salvageable, but they're gonna try because they need the tax write-off, in my opinion.
Right? Yeah. Which is horrible because as soon as I heard that was coming out, I was so excited, and I thought, wow, you could do some unbelievable things with this, and they've just completely and utterly washed this. Horrible. I can tell you, I've watched a few things on YouTube of a few creators on there who I sit and listen to us. I'm like, my word, why doesn't somebody go to this person and allow them to put together what this should be? Because phenomenal things, and what they've done here has just been a complete dereliction of duty, in my opinion.
I completely agree. I showed Sam this guy a long time ago. It's Tolkien Untangled, where he did he basically said, I don't want to just crap all over Rings of Power without being a creative myself and telling you how I would do it. And it's funny because Sam and I were listening to the LEP, or not the LEP podcast, the Unexpected podcast. And Sam actually was one of the first people, if not the first, to call into the Hobbit hotline and be like, this isn't the greatest TV show. And he kind of explained it. And then after, what was it? After season 1, Lane found Up Talkin' Tolkien. And basically that shifted his whole mindset on it.
Tolkien Untangled.
Or Tolkien Untangled,
Lane he is Up Talkin' Tolkien.
Yeah. He is.
Yeah.
So we couldn't agree
more. The funny
more.
thing is, Seth, that is exactly what I was talking about. Tolkien Untangled, absolutely. I'm telling you, yeah. I have learned more from watching him. And again, me and my older son, we will sit there and we will watch just videos of those over. And you just, the thing is, he can take these things and actually intricately break them down in a way that's very easily understandable. And even for people who don't really know the lore very well, they can help assimilate those things. And that's why, when James, my older son, and I are sitting around and hanging out and we're doing this, Tolkien Untangled almost always comes up for us to watch.
That's perfect. Great. He's by far my favorite Tolkien YouTuber. By far.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
We're on YouTube, Seth. That hurts, but okay. Moving.
The truth hurts sometimes, man. We are not that good. We are not that good.
I agree, 100%. Moving on to the meat and potatoes. Thank you, Dr. Damion, for playing along. Yes. It's interesting. Those are good questions, just to kind of get you rolling, get the ideas of what does he think about these parts of Tolkien? But let's jump into the lore side of things, as we've got some really good conversation. Like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about fatherhood, and so I decided I'd wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about Tolkien as a father first and foremost, and then we'll jump in with you, Damion, with what you've prepared. I just kind of asked him blindly, like, hey, think of a father in Middle Earth, or a couple of them that you want to talk about. And so I'm excited to see. I have no idea what you have come up with other than a couple names, so I'm really excited to hear that. But before that, a little bit on Tolkien. Obviously, if you know, most of you do, he grew up in Africa just for a little bit, actually, and his dad died when he was really young. and was buried there. And actually, one of his letters, he's talking about, I think he's talking to Michael or maybe Christopher, one of the two. But he mentions, because he's there during World War II while J.R.R. Tolkien is still in Britain, and he's writing him letters, and he's like, oh, I wonder, if this land is still like it was when I was a kid, and if my dad's tomb is still there and stuff. And so I've thought an awful lot about the fact that he didn't really have a dad at all growing up, and so his own experience as a father, I imagine he's winging it a lot. I imagine he's taken things from people in his own life that maybe poured into him. He talks a lot about, I think it was his headmaster or somebody at maybe it was the boarding school he was at, but obviously he had some mentors and people that poured into him a little bit, but he never had a dad. And so this is an interesting conversation jumping into it. But he himself as a father, I wanted to kind of do a little bit of dive in research on, what did his sons view him as? And I didn't find a whole lot of, I actually watched like a whole video on Christopher Tolkien doing a interview talking about his father's work, but he never actually mentions anything about him being a dad, which was interesting. He was very fascinated with his dad's work, obviously, and you see that as you walk through the letters, especially with Christopher. With Michael, there's more of like that personal relationship, it seems. With the letters with Christopher, it's kind of all business. Like Tolkien just sent him manuscripts of Lord of the Rings as he was writing it and saying, hey, what do you think of this? What would you change? And Christopher was all about it, whereas Michael, the letters are a bit more personal. And so I chose some excerpts from those letters specifically. And so first and foremost, I think it's interesting. In letter 250, I have a couple different excerpts that I want to share, but just kind of this gives us a picture of what Tolkien felt as a dad towards his kids. He says in letter 250 to Michael, I live in anxiety concerning my children. Me too. Who in this harder, crueler, and more mocking world into which I've survived must suffer more salt than I have. Which is, I mean, even just for me, there's, I guess, 23 years difference between me and my son, and even in that span of time, I do believe that it's a harder, crueler world to live in, with the advancement of technology and everything else too. So I think that's just kind of always going to be a theme moving forward. But then again, this is where I kind of want to have some dialogue, especially you, Dr. Damion, as you've had a bit more experience with fatherhood and actually have seen one of your children kind of leave and be a bit more independent. But Tolkien was pretty hard on himself. We know he was a very humble guy for the most part. I mean, maybe not when it comes to linguistics. He was pretty prideful about what he wrote. But when it comes to himself as a father, he says again, and later on in letter 250, he said, I brought you all up ill and talked to you too little. Out of wickedness and sloth, I almost ceased to practice my religion. I regret those days bitterly and suffer from them with such patience as I can be given, most of all because I failed as a father. Which anyone who, just thinks of Tolkien, the idea of failure, especially fatherhood, like you wouldn't put those two words together, but Tolkien himself put those two words together. And I'm just curious on your all's thoughts on, obviously, he built this incredible empire out of nothing. He never expected it to blow up the way it did. He worked a lot. It was, and you got to think of too the context in which he's raising kids in between the two world wars, and then he sends his kids off to World War II, and that's where he's writing most of these letters, is while they're out like on the battlefield and stuff. So much more difficult time than we're raising our kids. But I don't know, what strikes you from those excerpts? Obviously, I do live in anxiety concerning my kids. I want to know, I want them to be contributing members of society. I want them to know Jesus. I want them to love well. I want them to serve. I want to be humble. I want them to be strong. I want to be courageous. All these things, I have anxiety towards what they will become. Obviously, you, Dr. Damion, is somebody who's seen a little bit more where your kids are. Does that resonate with you at all?
No, absolutely. This is, and I can tell you, I have sat there so many nights thinking about the times that I have failed as a father. And I hate to say this, no matter how good of a father you may be, you are going to go through those times. And it's funny, I just sitting up here on my shelf right here, I found letters that I wrote to each of my kids when one was 9, one was 6, and one was 3, and and I'm apologizing to them.
Mm-hmm.
They've never seen them. I've actually never shown them to them, but it was more of a cathartic thing for me to write. But I can't tell you how many times I've felt that way, to where I have failed as a father for ways that I have parented through anger, through criticism, through fear and instability. It just happens because they're going to catch you at times. They're going to catch you at times, and you're going to lose your mind on them, and then later on you're going to apologize. And I've apologized multiple times to my children because of that. It's an unfortunate part of life, but again, we're all fallible, we're all human, and we have those times. And I can tell you, I've lost sleep over it, but luckily, I hope that, with what I have now, that I haven't scarred them too much, and hopefully they still, love me enough to be around me and want to spend time with me. So I can wholeheartedly reflect on what he says and feel it. There's no doubt about it.
I definitely agree with you in that. I mean, my kids are much younger, so I've had far less time and far easier discussions. I think telling my daughter not to pour water outside of the bathtub is a little different than probably the conversations you've had to have with your children through teenage years and transitioning into adulthood and all that. But yeah, just echoing what Dr. Damion said, like, there's been plenty of times where I say something, maybe it's criticism, maybe it's I came off a little too harsh, whatever it might be, where it hurts me more than it hurts my kids. And I don't mean to make that about me, because obviously it can be detrimental, but ultimately what it comes down to is I know my kids know that I love them, and I know that me apologizing to them and showing them that, hey, daddy messes up too, I hope can help set them up for one day when they have kids themselves, and they can look back at those times and be like, yeah, dad messed up quite a bit, but he was always there for me, always had my back, and he apologized and owned up to his mistakes and took responsibility, which it sounds like that's what Tolkien was doing in his letters.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, like, jumping backwards, I guess, in time in his letter writing, in letter 16, I just picked this one because I thought it was fun, and it shows like the pride of a father, if you will. But he's again writing to Michael, and this is in reference to Michael not making the rugby team. And I assume this is at like boarding school, so probably when he was a teenager. But this is what he tells his son Michael. He says, "I'm sorry and surprised you are not," in quotations, "yet on the team, but many a man ends up in it, and even with colors," which I assume is something, I don't know, maybe like varsity, or I don't know what that means, but who is rejected at first. It was so with me, and for the same reason too, but one day I decided to make up for weight by legitimate ferocity. I love that. So Tolkien was a small but mighty, ferocious on the field. And I ended up a house captain at end of the season and got my colors the next. But I got rather damaged, among things having my tongue nearly cut out. I can't imagine. They didn't have mouth guards back then, I guess.
Especially for a linguist.
Yeah. And as I am on the whole rather luckier than you, I should be really quite happy if you remain uninjured, though not on the team. But God bless you and keep you anyway. And I just picked that because it's just a fun, get a little peek into Tolkien's world, but also just as he's cheering on his son, like my dad, obviously our dad, I guess I should say. We were always talking after baseball games, like, oh, what could I have done better, or what could I have done different? He was even a big, like, he talked to the coach when I was not getting any playing time on varsity, even though every time that I did play, I would have multiple games with, hits and RBIs and doubles and stuff like that. And so he was always like, biggest fan, and had a lot of conversations on it. So I just thought it was kind of fun. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that, but I thought it was kind of a fun part of the letter.
I'll let you jump in if you have anything.
Oh, well, I was, I would like to say I was that real supportive dad in sports. I become the become that, and this is what has been the just bane of my existence was, so I played baseball in college, and it was very, sports oriented, and that's always been kind of my downfall with my children, and it's caused lots of problems. And I wasn't exactly the supportive dad. If they went 0 for 4, we weren't talking for a couple hours. And it was it was just one of those things that I really had to learn to check myself and realize that this wasn't about me. They felt just as bad about that 0 for 4 day, probably worse than what I did. And I had to learn how to, kind of step back from this and try to be, a little bit more supportive about things. And I can tell you, if you talk to my older 2 boys and even my middle boy who's still playing baseball in college, that dad was hard. Dad was hard. And that's been one of the biggest regrets that I have as a dad is, how I would approach those times. So it sounds like you guys had a dad that was very supportive of you during those times. Now, I coached the boys and through baseball and things along those lines, and it's the funny thing is if I stayed away from games, I was great. We could practice for 2 hours a night and love each other till the end of the day. And but boy, when games got there, it was problematic, and that's due to me. And so These are things that, as I went through and was looking at, what do you look at as a good dad? What makes a good father and what makes a poor father? Those were things that I wrote down in here that I was like, yep, that's an attribute that I have that is not good. And something that will always weigh on you. And I tell you, to this day, it's something that weighs on me right now.
Well, I'd be willing to bet that, just based on the limited knowledge I have of the relationship you have with your children, that yeah, you might have butted heads around that. It might have been a bit rough, but clearly they still, respect you and care for your opinion and want to spend time with you. And it's, it's one of those things where could have probably done better in certain areas, but at the end of the day, like I said earlier, they know they're loved, they know they're safe with you, and that you genuinely are coming at it from a place of love, even if we don't always approach it in the right way. So yeah. With our dad, I don't know, my dad was always there for every practice, every game, always pushing me to do better, but also, I don't know how to describe it. He never really forced me to do it. He just cultivated.
He made
what
sure
was
it
in
wasn't
me.
the most important thing. I feel like, at least for me, like he made sure to do your best, work hard. Like if you want to actually be on varsity, you want to have a start, like you put in the work, but at the same time, it is not the most important thing in your life. Is kind of what I got from it.
Yeah, I think he tried that with me. I think hockey was definitely the most important thing in my life for a very long time. But yeah, I always just think real quick, this experience I had with dad where I was 13 or 14. Yeah, 13 turning 14. And I was trying to make a pretty high jump from just starting ice hockey, going from A to an age group higher, plus going up 2 levels into AAA. And there was a skating camp that I was doing called the Camp of No Forgiveness. And it literally was the Camp of No Forgiveness. It was not fun. And I remember after the first couple nights of camp, I was like, Dad, I'm done. Like, this isn't worth it. I don't care this much. And Dad just kind of sat there and listened to me, get frustrated about it. And I can't do this. It's too hard, this and that. And Dad looked at me and I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something to the effect of, hey, if it's really too hard and this isn't something you want to continue doing, that's fine. We can make that decision. But I know you, and I know that it's not too hard for you. And I think you'll regret if you do quit. Let's stick it out for another week. And sure enough, at, the end of that week or whatever, I kept going and ended up doing that camp for 3 years in a row and, progressing. And it was kind of that fork in the road where Dad gave me the option, if this isn't as important as you don't think it is, or as you think it is, you can leave. But I don't think that's the case. But he didn't push it on me. He was very, I think this is you, but what do you think, type of thing.
Yeah. Love that. the last excerpt from one of the letters, again back to Michael, that I chose before we dive into some of Tolkien's work. This is just, I thought this was so deep. Obviously, our dad's getting older, but also just as an understanding for me too with my kids, when it feels like I still have eternity with them, even though I obviously don't. We're all our time is limited, and we never know what's going to happen. But I just thought this was like one of the most deepest like moments of Tolkien expressing his heart to Michael. He says this in letter 45. So this is, I imagine Michael's a little bit obviously older than the rugby kid, but maybe not quite into World War II. I don't know exactly when this was. I could probably look it up pretty easily. But either way, he says this in letter 45. He says, "Still, you are my flesh and blood, and carry on the name. It is something to be the father of a good young soldier." So I guess, yeah, he's obviously in World War II. This is like right when it started. "Can't you see why I care so much about you, and why all that you do concerns me so closely?" Which is, I mean, I wish I could explain that to Baron right now, as he's, almost 2.5, like doing just the craziest stuff. It's like, everything you do, I care so much about. But he said, he continues to say, "Still, let us both take heart of hope and faith. The link between father and son is not only of the perishable flesh, it must have something of," and I'm going to butcher this. This is, I think, Latin, aeternitas, which just means eternity. I had to look it up. I was like, what the heck is he talking about? It's eternity. So something of eternity about it. "And there's a place called heaven, where the good here unfinished is complete, and where the stories unwritten and the hope unfulfilled are continued. We may laugh together yet." And so again, this is right at the beginning of the war. He has no idea what's going to happen to his son. He's writing in a very emotional and heartfelt way. But I just thought that was, obviously he's a very religious man. He was a Catholic. He believes in life after death, as I do, and the eternity that we have together, those of us who put our hope and faith in Christ Jesus. And so I just thought it was a very moving excerpt, and something that, man, if I'm a kid, I'm off to war, and I get this from my dad, that'd be pretty encouraging, pretty hope-filled. But I don't know. It's something I thought I'd bring up, as obviously some of the dads that we're about to jump into, they lose their kids, or their kids lose their dads. And so it's something that he says, again, it's eternal. And I love that part. "There's a place called heaven, where the good here unfinished is completed, and where the stories unwritten and the hope unfulfilled are continued." It just kind of reminds me of Gandalf when he's saying death. That's not the end. It's it's just a path that we all must take. And so, yeah, not that there's a whole lot that we can dive into there, but I don't know if that struck a chord with you, Seth, at all. If there's anything you want to share about that. But
yeah, no, I think it's just eloquently written. It's something that Tolkien does better than I can ever attempt to do, is phrasing things in a beautiful, eloquent way that resonates with the soul, on a way that I guess modern writing just can't match.
Yeah, absolutely.
And something I have written here is, it's actually from the Bible. It's 2 Timothy 3:16-17, and it says, "All scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be adequate, equipped for everyday work." And, this was something that, in hearing you say that kind of is something that I think about, is I had 2 of my boys baptized a few months ago. And I thought of this. I thought of this scripture right here, and the one thing that comes out of these, these discussions, is I kind of looked at it as a way of, what are the characteristics of a poor father, and what are the characteristics and biblical attributes of a good father? A strong father figure, a role model. And I came across this quote. And it says, "If a man does not teach his children truth, others will teach them error."
Mm.
And so, from that standpoint, being able to look at, we're gonna pull in some of these characters from the legendarium, and we're gonna discuss, their fatherly attributes and how they can be kind of applied to everyday life. That's how I approached it. But I saw that and I was like, gosh, what a poignant thing to really think about and say, is that, I have to teach my child truth and how to approach life, because if I don't, somebody else is going to teach them error. And if you're living your life allowing your child to be just continually on their phone and filled with all of these outside influences that you do not have a hand in, it's going to force them down a road that we often don't want them to go. And I think that that's something that as fathers, we, especially now as technology becomes more and more pervasive across younger and younger generations, it's extremely problematic and something we need to be thinking about on a continuous basis. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a fantastic quote, and gosh, that resonates with like conversations me and my wife have probably 5 times a day whenever I'm home, is like, how do we do this, especially with, like you said, the ubiquity of the internet these days and the things that are coming across there, and how do we import truth into their little wrinkles in their brain, as opposed to what is being fed to them from outside sources. And I think ultimately what my wife and I have landed on, and we're far behind where you are, you've got a lot more wisdom in this area, but we're okay being the bad guys in the short term, and maybe withholding some things that they might deem unfair to be withheld because X, Y, and Z, other people's parents, whatever. As a father, I have to lead by going first and being willing to stand tall in my convictions. And one of those convictions is sharing truth with our children. So I appreciate you sharing that quote, because that really resonates.
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome. So Dr. Damion, how about you kind of start off? I know you said when we were starting to record, like, hey, cut me off, I don't want to just go on a long soliloquy. Honestly, I'd love to hear whatever you have to say. So I know Sam had briefly mentioned maybe you were going to go through the line of the Noldorian kings or something like that, but honestly, whatever you cooked up, I'm all ears. So we'll start with you and kind of tying in this whole discussion of fatherhood and what that looked like in Middle Earth or Beleriand or wherever, Valinor, wherever it might be.
Yeah. Perfect. No, that sounds great. And the thing about it is that as I started to look at these, I initially wanted to start with Feanor, because again, Feanor to me, he's a compelling figure, and honestly, I love reading about him. I love learning more about him. He is the greatest of the children of Iluvatar. I mean, the guy's got it all. And so initially, I was like, okay, let's look at his fathering style. What does he do? What attributes does he have that makes him a good father? What attributes does he have that makes him a bad father? And so as I started reading about this, then I started reading how, his father, the life that his father led kind of contributed to these attributes of Feanor. So I'm like, okay, well, let's talk a little bit about, Finwë, the first king of the Noldor. And then I started going through, I'm like, I get through Finwë, Feanor, Fingolfin, Turgon, I even brought Tuor in this, Elrond, and I'm like, I can't do all of them. And believe me, I have things here for all of them, but what I need and probably will ask for you is for some guidance as to, who you would be most interested in hearing about. But I think what I'll do is, first of all, I'd just kind of like to start with, what do we look at as attributes of a poor father and attributes of a good father, and how these kind of connect in with these Noldoran kings and princes. And some of the things that I sat down and looked at, because I see my fallibility as a father and human nature and as a human being. And some of the things that I looked at was, what were ways that I parented through that was problematic. And, I looked and I thought, Anger comes in. When you're mad, you don't parent well. Looked at like conditional love and favoritism, which I've tried 1,000,000% not to do. What I found in looking through these is that there was a lot of that going on with the Noldoran kings and princes. Parenting through criticism, parenting through fear, instability, things along those lines. And then when I started looking at, well, what are some of the biblical attributes that we look at of a strong father? And, what do we think of? We think of a spiritual leader, a role model in speech and love and faith, things along those lines. And what do? We instruct and we teach our children. And that's where that 2 Timothy quote comes in, all of this is profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction. We have to correct our children. Again, you mentioned earlier, Seth, it's great to be your child's friend, but it's more important to be their father. And I can tell you, there's been a lot of times that the hammer has to come down, especially as boys start to get older and start to, they may be bigger than you, but they need to understand that, you don't talk to your mother this way. When you're told to do something, you do it, and you need to let them know. And there's times when being a friend is great, but there's also times when being a father is required. And I think that's one of the things that's happened with our society now is kind of the lack of fathers and the lack of I guess you would say culpability or accountability for a lot of these young men and women that are growing up. But the other aspects that we look at, imparting godly wisdom, disciplining with love, which honestly, that's what I put asterisk my struggle. And just being a compassionate provider, protector, things along those lines. And so those were the things that I looked at as some of the biblical attributes of a strong father. And so what I did was I went through and I basically started from the top down. Initially had Feanor in there, but looked at Finwë and realized that Finwë had a huge hand in determining how Feanor turned out in regards to all of this. And so if we kind of look at what the background of who Finwë is, well, Finwë was one of the original 3 ambassadors that came from Cuiviénen, was brought over by Orome to the Undying Lands, met with the Valar, saw the 2 trees, basically came back and said, look, this is a place we need to be. And the thing was that he comes back over, he marries Miriel, one of the other Noldor, and has a child. Well, this is Feanor. The problem with this is that Feanor basically took so much of the spirit out of Miriel that she pretty much just gave up her life at that point. And there's a quote that she says that the spirit that would have nourished many has gone into Feanor. And with that, she basically just gave up her life. And something that doesn't brought up very often is that she was given the opportunity twice to return to bodily form. But she just basically said, I don't have it in me, and stayed in the halls of Mando. So there were times when she was given opportunities to come back. So you have Finwë and you have Feanor. And the thing about it is they're the first widower and the first orphan in all of the Undying Land. She was essentially the first death that occurs there. Yeah. So obviously this is going to play on both of them. And at that point, well, what happens? Finwë just starts pouring every bit of love that he has into Feanor. And we know that sometimes that's not always the best thing, because you create a bit of a monster in somebody who has just received all love and no correction. And so we kind of understand this, though, because, I mean, Feanor he's a prodigy. This guy is the best at pretty much just about everything. And what Tolkien actually writes is he's described as the mightiest of the children of Iluvatar. And I want to read this so to be sure I don't screw it up. It says, "For Feanor was made the mightiest in all parts of body and mind, in valor, in endurance, in beauty, in understanding, in skill, in strength, and in subtlety alike, of all the children of Iluvatar. And a bright flame was within him." And that's from the Quintus Silmarillion. And with this, we see that, it was easy to love Feanor from Finway's standpoint. I mean, you've got a kid that is just, he's a stud. You love watching him. When he goes out and does something, he kills it every time. And you're like, okay, this is my favorite. Look at him go. But the problem is that this sort of favoritism that we'll see later on whenever Finway gets remarried, it never changes.
Right.
Feanor stays the favorite out of all of these, out of all of his children. And what happens is that basically it was kind of an inability to guide and correct Feanor, which I think led to a lot of the contributions to some of the heinous acts that he kind of contributed to. I mean, you think about, he pulled the sword on Fingolfin, he declared the oath of Feanor, the kinslaying at Alcolande, the burning of the ships at Losgar. All of these things are things that we see coming from basically a spoiled kid in a way, because he never really had the correction from a father who treated him as the favorite of all of them.
Yeah, it seems like Feanor was never really told no. And especially me having like a toddler now who wants everything and will literally, bang his head or scream or cry or do whatever he can to try to convince me to get what he wants. The other day it was Chick-fil-A, and we never even brought up Chick-fil-A. He wouldn't eat his mac and cheese for lunch because he wanted Chick-fil-A. I'm like, bro, you have mac and cheese. What's the problem here? but it's that idea that I mean, to your point, like he puts everything. He wants to love him so much. He wants to receive the love from his son too, and so he thinks, if I please him, if I just give him what he wants, the relationship will be good. And I mean, to your point, Seth, like that's obviously not the way to build a well-rounded individual. And we see time and time again where opportunities where people are trying to give him feedback or counsel. Even the Teleri elf, I forget his name, as they're having that conversation, he's trying to reason with him, and Feanor is just like, no, like I want this. I don't care about you. I don't care about your ships. I want your ships, and then I'm going to burn your ships. And so it's that idea, again, going back to like teaching your kids truth and being willing to say, no, that's not good for you right now.
This is
and it comes down to like, go ahead.
Oh,
Seth,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I was just going to add to it too. I don't know if you were kind of going to go down this track a little bit, but Finway's decision to remarry and have multiple other children, I think, kind of contributed to that as well. Because like you described, that favoritism and everything, it's an interesting thing in that with the type of child that Feanor was, would it have been better if Finway had not remarried and not had Fingolfin and Finarfin? However, when you look at the trajectory of Middle Earth and kind of the elven lineage, which is so wild, if he doesn't remarry, you don't get Galadriel, who then basically rescues the Fellowship and brings the whole story full circle. And so in a way, it's almost Tolkien's way of showing that like all things, even perhaps not great choices, I'm not saying it was a bad choice to remarry, but things that might have led to more challenges ultimately work out for good.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I think that one of the things that I sort of looked at this and, how lack of discipline and lack of correction, I mean, what does that do to a child? I mean, it creates poor self-control. It creates immaturity. It creates basically a lack of responsibility for your own actions. And he's the epitome of this. And, I mean, I will never disparage anybody that says anything, but I think he proves he does some things wrong. I've seen the stuff that says Feanor did no wrong. I mean, I got to disagree with him a little bit, but but I think that there's something that comes along with, you know, it teaches a child self-regulation, and you know, if they know rules and expectations, and you provide that as a father, you can rein a lot of this in, and this just didn't happen here. So that was kind of my run through on Finway there. And I'll tell you this. So I have bits on Feanor. I have bits on Fingolfin. I have Turgon. I have Elrond. You know, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys to pick which of these you would like me to actually focus on, because if not, it will go for a long time. And I like I said, I don't want to you know, cause a whole big time sink here and prevent you guys from being able to talk about it. But I just got going, and it was sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy that kept going further and further in. But I kind of discuss Feanor as, you know, some of his attributes and poor attributes, and then I look at Fingolfin and Turgon, and what I'll do is I'll do Feanor, and then what I'll do is I'll ask you guys if you'll pick one of the pick one of those and say, hey, do Turgon, do Fingolfin, whoever you'd like. And I think I'd probably go with Turgon if I was you guys, but I'm just saying. So I think Feanor, because he was initially the person who I was picking to look at, you know, what were his paternal attributes, because I mean, the guy had 7 sons. That's essentially unheard of. And right, exactly. There's actually an article that Tolkien wrote that it's called "Of the Laws and Customs Among the Eldar." I don't know if you guys have seen this or not, but they sort of discuss things that are put out in other books and other media that says that basically the strength and vitality of an elven woman is heavily taxed by childbirth. So in it, he writes, in the bearing of elven children, the greater share of strength of their being, meaning the elven mother, in mind and body goes forth than in the making of the birth of a mortal child. And for these reasons, it came to pass that the Eldar brought forth few children. So that's essentially what happened. So Feanor comes along. You know, he basically just sucks this life force from his mom, Muriel. She says, I'm done. You know, I'll go hang out in Lorien for a while. Even then, I'm not loving life. Just take my spirit, send me to the halls of Mandos. And, you know, with that, it shows just how much goes into the making and nurturing of an elven child, which kind of brings me to an interesting thing here. So if you think about that, Feanor's wife, Nerdanel, she had 7 sons, which goes to show you, I mean, that had to be, she had to have something in her. And I think it goes to show in the books that talks about the fact that she's one of the few people who can reason with Feanor and prevent some of these, poor attributes that he's used to displaying. And basically up until the time that he makes the decision to start producing armor and weapons of war and things like that, she could restrain him a little bit. And his father could a little bit also. So that kind of shows how much strength that she had. But when we kind of put all these things together, like I said earlier, I mean, she was the first elven death, and that has to affect both the father and the son. Because here's the father. He's the only person in Valinor that is alone in regards, purposefully alone. You know, he wants love. And so what happens? He pours it all into Feanor. And so Feanor is just, taking all this in and learns those attributes of, hey, I'm the most important thing in the world and nobody else matters. But, as time goes along, he starts to become this amazing, producer of, mental works of his hands, things like that. I mean, you think about it, Tangwar script, the Feanorian lamps, the Palantiri, which we still see in the Third Age, and the Silmarils, obviously. But it's just those are things that I think kind of later end up guiding his parenting style. And so what I want to say here is just one thing. So at Finway's death, we know that Feanor was capable of loving intensely. In the book, it says that at Finway's death, Feanor ran from the Ring of Doom and fled into the night, for his father was dearer to him than the light of Valinor or the peerless works of his hands. So, I mean, that's an intensity right there, because obviously he was willing to put his sons in harm's way just to save the Silmarils. And so I looked at 3 ways that Feanor modeled fatherhood. Okay. And again, cut me off. I don't want to talk too long here, but first of all, he modeled fatherhood through anger, unfortunately. He used anger to guide basically every decision that he made. This showed in his speech and his actions. Examples, again, we talked about the sword to his brother's chest, the oath of Feanor, the kinslaying at Alqualande. These are all things. His anger drove this, and what we know is that anger in a father produces instability and insecurity in children, and I think that comes up later on, and we see that quite well with his kids. Second of all, he also showed favoritism, and this is a question that I'll put to you guys. Do you know who Feanor's favorite son was?
Not the one he left on the ships.
Yeah, right, exactly. not that one.
I forgot his name, honestly, but I do remember the excerpt of him talking about it, because he was most like him in mood and spirit, or something along those lines. It wasn't exactly. Caranthir, was it?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't remember his name, but I do remember him describing why.
Exactly. So if we think of Celebrimbor, his father was Curufin. And so you have Curufin, and it says that so Curufin was his 5th son. And you hit it on the head. This is from the Shibboleth of Feanor, and it says, Feanor's own name given to this his favorite son, because he alone showed some degree of the same temper and talents. He also resembled Feanor very much in faith. And so, again, he has this same sort of favoritism, because, again, you gravitate towards what's closest to you. You gravitate towards, like in our instance, you gravitate towards people who have good marriages. You gravitate towards people who have good children, who you're happy having your children hang out with, things along those lines. And then finally, he modeled, basically, in my opinion, he had a willful disregard for lives and concerns of others. I mean, no matter how you go about it, he did. And I'm going to point out that he actually had a willful disregard for his sons here. I'm going to point out why I feel this way. I'm going to point out 2 instances. First of all, was the kinslaying at Alqualande. And we talk about the fact that you brought it up earlier, that after the time that his father was killed at Formanos and the Silmarils were stolen by Melkor at that time, he hadn't been named Morgoth at that point, but they were stolen by Melkor, and he had fled to Middle Earth at that point. Feanor's like, look, I just made this oath of Feanor, we no longer have the Valar to protect us. They're not here to do anything good for us. We need to go to Middle Earth. We need to start our own colonies and kingdoms, and we need to go after Melkor in this instance. And well, easiest way to get there, it's and so basically what Feanor does is he goes to Alqualande, where the Teleri are, which is basically the third kindred of the elves, and they were known as essentially sea lovers. And they built amazing ships, and they actually describe it in the books as the love for their ships was as the love that Feanor had for his Silmarils. So they come up. Feanor wants their ships. Obviously, what are they going to say? No. Olwe is going to tell them no. Olwe is the brother of Elwë or Elu Thingol from Doriath, but he tells them no. Well, at that point, a lack of self-control leads to basically the slaughter and massacre of the Teleri. Even though they put up a good fight, they couldn't maintain it. And so basically it just shows this lack of complete self-control. Next, I kind of talk a little bit about what happened at Feanor's death. And I think this is really an interesting thing to me, is that I find this just as egregious, because he puts his sons at an unbelievable disadvantage here. When Feanor and his sons get to Middle Earth, obviously they burn all the ships. They strand the rest of the Noldor back on Valinor. But at that time, Morgoth sends orcs, and they fight the first major battle of Middle Earth, and just basically just destroy the orcs, because, you know, you have these elves who are from the Undying Lands. They've been in the presence of the two trees. They've basically imbibed this power that comes from them. So orcs have no chance. Well, at this point, Feanor decides, I'm going all the way. I'm going to Angband. I'm going to take out Morgoth. Well, at that point, here comes our first visualization of the Valar Aukar, which Balrogs, and Feanor puts up a heck of a fight, gives him many wounds, things along those lines, but ends up dying from a blow from Gothmog, who is the Lord of Balrogs. So this is the part that I kind of wanted to point out, was that his sons come in, they drive off the Balrogs, they take their father, they're trying to take him back to Lake Mithrin and basically revive him. He's still partially alive here, he's still there, but basically he realizes at some point, I'm dying. I'm not going to make it any longer. So he stops his sons, looks back at Thangorodrim, and it writes in one of the letters that he realizes at that point that the Noldor will never be able to take down Morgoth by themselves. But here comes the problem, and here comes the most egregious portion of it, is he basically reiterates to his sons, all at this point, all six that are left, that they swore an oath to get back the Silmarils no matter what. And he understands. This is a death sentence for them. They have no chance of being able to wrest these from Morgoth, basically the most powerful created being that's in Ea, Arda, or the Timeless Halls outside of Eru Iluvatar. And at that point, he doesn't have enough intrinsic love for his children to say, look, go to the Valar, tell them that we can't do this, and I release you from this oath. And I know everybody says, well, they swore it under Iluvatar's name and they couldn't go back on it. But I have to say, I would give my sons every chance to back out of that one as they could. But he knew he had given them a death sentence, and he didn't back off from it. And I find that to be a real problem because of his kind of vengeful pride from it.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. I think I'm thinking specifically of So the Silmarils are something he created, right? But so are his sons. I mean, obviously, with the help of his wife and the two becoming one, all that kind of stuff, biology. but to me, like, of all my accomplishments, of everything that I could boast of myself, my two sons are it for me, and I think that's even how God the Father looks at us as his creation, is like, that creation, that's my favorite. That's what I want to cherish, what I want to love, what I want to sustain and restore and redeem. And especially, you hit the nail on the head. Like, I would want every opportunity for my kids to not have to be under that anymore. And you think about how he brought them under it, even knowing he wasn't even going to be around to see if they succeeded or not, knowing they probably wouldn't, but just being okay with really screwing them over and making the rest of their lives to be about this one thing that, I mean, you think of the stunting that does to their development, to their opportunity, to their futures, to what they could have been doing in all of Middle Earth. But even looking at like how they went off and fought Morgoth and stuff, and some of that really moves. Like, you have the Battle of Unnumbered Tears and Battle of Sudden Flame that is kind of pushed forward by the Sons of Feanor, and some good comes of it. But at the same time, still, it's like, dude, what's going on here? Why are these, albeit amazing gems, best that's ever been created by anyone outside of Eru, like, but how is that better than your own flesh and blood? Exactly, like going back to Tolkien's letter, like, your own personhood is in these children far more than your Silmarils. But Seth, looks like you're about to chime in.
No, I was gonna say, it's interesting that you say that, because as you track through the history of Beleriand, at the very end of the First Age, you see Maedhros and Maglor still dealing with this when they're the only two left. They had just committed the third kinslaying. They've basically adopted Elrond and Elros because they chased off mom and dad and killed off the rest of their kin. And so they've adopted these two boys, and they're raising them actually pretty well, all things considered. And they're basically sitting there like, hey, we've turned our lives around after we committed these heinous acts again. And they're just looking at each other going, all right, well, the Valar came and helped get rid of Melkor or Morgoth and recloop the Silmarils. We got to go try to get them from the good guys. And ultimately they do. And Yonway basically says, like, we're not going to kill them. We're not going to touch them. And ultimately those Silmarils, after they recoup them, I forget which one does which, but one of them jumps into the sea with it basically, and then the other one, it's lost in the earth somewhere, and that's the end of the Sons of Feanor. And so you see that oath track all the way down to the final death of his, I think, the two oldest sons. I could be wrong on the order, but his two remaining sons.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. And this was, it's interesting that as you're walking through all this stuff, Dr. Damion, we had this conversation with Feanor himself, or the anonymous Feanor, and we brought up all these points too, and then he still was at the thing, that the rebuttal that he kept going back to was the death of his father, and how deeply that left an effect on him to really not care about anything else. And you mentioned, like, the love that he had for his father seems to be far more than the love that he had for his sons. And so obviously there's a lot of toxicity in that relationship, and probably born from not having a mom to also be that person to love as well. But I think you did a fantastic job of outlining, especially like that, trying to lead through anger and selfishness, genuinely, of Feanor.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I lost my dad reasonably young at 19 years old, and carried a lot of anger because of that. And I think that I that's why I kind of empathize. I have empathy for Feanor, understanding, how he does feel, that loss, that anger, and how sometimes you kind of bring that to bear at times that you don't want to. And I've done that with my kids. And that's, one of those first things that came up as I looked at, how have I parented and how have I failed from that standpoint, and it would have to be that anger, and I know directly where it comes from. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But
Sure.
I think if you guys don't mind, I would ask that one of you guys, step in, because again, you heard I get going, and it's just like it's a soliloquy at that point. So there's very little back and forth. So I want to turn it over to you guys. I'm sorry about that. I kind of get rolling and don't even.
I loved it.
No, honestly, when Sam mentioned that you had quite a bit, that you were excited to do this, I was like, heck yeah, because I always, Sam and I, we can talk nonstop. We do this, not as frequently as we'd like, but we do it often, and it's always cool to hear an outside perspective and have a conversation around it. So I know from my perspective, I love hearing it. Kind of going off of what you said earlier, I really would like to hear about Turgon, and what your thoughts are with that. And then I also would really like to hear about Elrond, because those are a couple that I've, had some thoughts about, read about quite extensively. And I think overall, both of them do very well. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts specifically with like Turgon and, the adoption, as it were, of Maeglin.
So real quick before you jump in, sorry to cut you off. I think so. We had kind of put together some thoughts for some third age fathers. So I think this is a really good opportunity to. I'm thinking this episode needs to be 2 parts. Not necessarily that we need to stop this conversation and re-record another time, because Lord knows our schedules are so hard to get together. So if you have the time, Dr. Damion, we can stay as long as we need to get through it. But I think what I will do is we'll like. Part 1 of this episode will probably just be what you have brought up here, and then part 2 we can talk about. We have some compare and contrast of Theoden and Denethor and their fatherhood. I put in Helm Hammerhand in there as well, just because he's a fun character, but there's really not a whole lot there other than just some speculation you can make. But the amount of writing there is about him is very minuscule, especially when it comes to fatherhood. So we'll probably stick to those 2, since they're at the same time and very kind of contrasting. But with that said, don't feel like you have to cut yourself short at all, because like I said, I think I'll just make this like a 2 episode. Two-part episodes, and so first part being the first stage fatherhood that we're talking about here. So go ahead and take it away with Turgon. I think it'd be great.
Yeah, I love that.
That makes me feel a little bit better. So thanks. I was looking through this and going, oh my word, they'll never talk to me again after this.
No, like genuinely, I'm having a blast. Like I'm genuinely having a blast, and so I definitely don't want you to feel like I'm learning as we're going through this too. Like Seth knows more than I do, and especially when it comes to like first stage, I'm a bit more versed in later on in Tolkien's more regular writings and stuff. So some of the more obscure stuff, I'm just soaking it in. So I love it. So definitely don't feel any sort of way. Just do your thing, man. You're doing great.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So if we are to, make our way to Turgon, who obviously that's who I brought up earlier in our, the back and forth discussion of, is this man, is this elf, is this, I think Turgon is a really, really interesting character. And I'll kind of start off with this from the standpoint that, so Turgon is the second son of Fingolfin. So this is where we run into the problem, is all the names sound the same. And this is what my son James told me, today. He goes, I just got to sit down and just memorize. That's what I got to do. And I was like, man, it took me a long time to get this, because all the names sound the same, Finwë, Feanor, Fingolfin, Finarfin. And then you go down to the next row and it's just, they all sound the same. But in either case, we have Finwë, who we talked about earlier. He was the father of Feanor with Miriel. And then you have Fingolfin and Finarfin, who was who were kind of progeny of Finwë and Indis. So Indis was of the Vanyar, another of the groups of the elves. And Fingolfin's second son was Turgon. Now, Turgon, this is a really interesting quote that you get from the Quintus Silmarillion, and it says in quotes, and this is coming from Morgoth's thoughts. Okay, and most of all his kin, Morgoth feared Turgon, for of old in Valinor his eye had lighted upon him, and whenever he drew near, a shadow had fallen on his spirit, foreboding that in some time that yet lay hidden from Turgon, ruin should come to him. And so I think the first time I read that, I completely missed it. Because again, the names, they confuse you, and you don't really think about it. Well, we talked about the fact that Turgon, his wife Elenwe, was the only named death in the Helcaraxe. But at the time that Elenwe fell in, his daughter Idril fell in at the same time. So he jumped in, tried to save both of them, but was only able to save Idril. So Idril is his daughter. She's seen the trees. She is one of these elves of light. And so you have to think that Turgon would have sort of the same mental process as you mentioned, that you didn't like Elu Thingol. And obviously he's the father of Luthien, and he didn't want Beren to come in there. He referred to him as baseborn, and didn't feel that he was good enough for his daughter. Well, on the other hand, you've got Turgon, and the reason that I say this is really neat is because Morgoth knew that something was going to happen, and it was going to come through Turgon. Well, it does come through Turgon. And the reason for that is because Turgon is actually the grandfather of Eärendil. And obviously Eärendil is the first being to make it back to Valinor, or the Undying Lands, and does it on behalf of the elves and man. And the reason that this is important is because Eärendil is, if I'm not mistaken, the first half elven. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not wholly positive, but I believe he was the first half elven. His mother was Idril, who was actually an elf of light, of the Noldor, and his father was Tuor. So this is a really interesting thing that comes about this, because in I believe it was the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, Hurin and Huor, who are men, basically protect Turgon and allow him to get back to Gondolin. And as the time that Turgon is retreating from this, Huor turns to him and essentially tells him that from them a new star would arise. So if we think about this, you've got Turgon and Idril, you've got Huor, and you've got Tuor. Tuor makes his way to Gondolin through this wonderful circuitous route that we don't want to talk about, but he gets to Gondolin and marries Idril, and they have Eärendil, who Eärendil is considered the greatest hero of maybe the entire legendarium, because he and his wife Elwing were able to sail to the Undying Lands, meet with the Valar, and basically plead for them to come to Middle Earth and essentially take out Morgoth. And that's what led to it. So that's why I think that, you see all these things that happen with Turgon that kind of run under the radar a little bit. And I think that as I looked at Turgon, I thought, this is a guy or an elf who I don't feel like got enough screen time. Well, maybe he does in the whole thing, but I just feel like he maybe was underplayed a little bit. the other aspect of this is that both Fingolfin, who is his father, and Turgon spoke against Feanor leaving and going to Middle Earth at the time of the Oath of Feanor. And they actually almost came to swords at that time. But I think that goes to show you that those two looked at this and said, hey, Feanor, he's got some issues. And we don't want the remnant of the Noldor that's going with him to be, solely under his rule, because essentially he'll use them as a pawn to get what he's looking for. And they felt that the remnant of the Noldor needed their protection. And that's why they actually came to Middle Earth, both Fingolfin and Turgon. Neither one of them really wanted to go, but they went to protect their people. And I think that's how much more fatherly and paternal does that get? Because who among us with children wouldn't lay down their life to protect them? And we see that with Turgon on the Helcaraxe. His daughter fell in, Idril, and he jumped in and saved her, knowing that there's the possibility that he might lose his life also. And these are things that, as we start to put these things together, we know that that's what a good father does. And I think Turgon's just a great example of all of that. And again, as Huor describes, the new star that would come from both of them ends up saving Middle Earth. So cool stuff there. Really good stuff.
One thing I love about that too is the new star shall arise. With that, it's basically speaking a prophecy that it's going to be the Silmaril in the sky that Arendelle flies around with. That is the new star.
Yeah.
And so, yes. I mean, Huor is saying this without any idea that they're going to get any of these Silmarils back. But if I remember correctly, because Sam and I did a whole podcast going through the Children of Hurin, and this chapter was awesome, but I want to say it was almost like he spoke with words that weren't his own, which you see happen a couple times throughout the story, especially with Tuor, his son, when he gets access to Gondolin, right? And
right.
So I just love the prophecy of a new star shall arise, where it's not just like, hey, from us, you'll be rescued, but no, it's one of the Silmarils that Frodo and Sam are going to look to when they're at, on the cracks of doom and in Shelob's lair and things like that. And they're going to talk about Erendil and that new star. And it just, Tolkien's mind just blows me away how things come full circle. It's incredible.
It is. Agreed.
And just a quick fun aside, just talking about Idril, obviously, like she had the elf stone, Elisar stone, that she gave to her son Arendil, hoping to heal Middle Earth, and that was taken up with him. And there's speculation that Olorund gets that stone, brings it back, gives it. Celebrimbor makes another one for Galadriel and all that kind of stuff. But obviously, my son's name is Elisar, meaning healer, and to bring healing. Obviously, that's the name given to Aragorn too, as he's healing the land after scourging Sauron and banishing him out of Middle Earth. But just a fun aside that comes from Idril and the relationship between man and elf that was really not supposed to happen. We did a podcast on Aragorn and Arwen, and we went through this relationship a little bit too, and obviously Beren and Luthien as well, as those three kind of those are the only three times as far as we know, right? I think that there might be one more, but it doesn't happen often, and usually when it happens, big things come out of that. It's like a fate. There's like a fate drop. Like Tolkien's like saying, "Hey, pay attention, because something big's about to happen through this relationship."
And I wanted to throw this in there real quick too. Something you said kind of struck a chord with me, in that you were comparing, and I had never thought of it this way, comparing Turgon to Thingol. And if you look at it, both of them had to accept a mortal man to wed their daughter. And Turgon does this, we're talking about perspective of a father. He does this with open arms, and he loves Tuor as his own son, and he's getting joy and happiness out of the the union between his daughter and Tuor. When you contrast that with Beren and how Thingol treats him, like you said, he calls him baseborn, he sends him on a suicide mission. When you're talking about fathers, it really is an interesting contrast, and I had never thought of that until you mentioned it. So that's a very interesting point to me.
No, it's definitely something that I've thought about a few times, because, you know, as the father of a daughter, you know, I think that no man will ever be good enough for my daughter. And I kind of feel like, well, I lean more towards a Thingol, but then I know that that's not a reasonable approach to life. And it's one of those things that as you kind of look at the legendarium a little bit and you understand that, well, what Tuor went through. I mean, he went to Vinyamar at Nevrast. He picked up the mail, the helm, and all these, and then comes before Turgon, and I think that obviously sort of opened Turgon to the idea that this is someone special, and that there's probably a reason why he's here, and maybe this is the, you know, kind of that small snowball that gets rolling and causes the avalanche.
Yeah, that's awesome. Go ahead, Sam.
I was just gonna say it's I think what you guys both as fathers of daughters maybe should take, and we'll probably talk about this here in a second, but maybe the approach of Elrond, you know, just tell the young strapping man who wants to wed your daughter, hey, you got to become a king of a nation first and fulfill your destiny, and then we can talk. It's probably my thinking. Find middle ground, maybe.
I like that.
It's a very similar suicide mission to what Beren got sent on, to be fair.
Well, semantics.
Small chance of success.
What are we waiting for?
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you say you had some stuff on Fingolfin as well?
Yeah, I do. So when we let me kind of get my little bit of notes here. Yeah. Okay. So again, I've sort of talked about the background of Fingolfin. He's the eldest son of the marriage between Finwë and Indus. And so this made him the half brother of Feanor. And obviously when you read through everything, Feanor just despises him. Yeah. And despises Indus, despises, Finarfin, who is probably one of the best elves in all of the legendarium. So it seems pretty tough that you could dislike him, but that's such as Feanor. But so as we look at Fingolfin is described by Tolkien as the strongest, the most steadfast, and some people put wise in there. The strongest, the most steadfast, and the most valiant of Finwë's sons. And so he was cool because not only was he, this valiant, amazing fighter, he was also a two-time king of the Noldor, which is, sort of an interesting thing. But we sort of talked earlier that, what's he most known for? What is he most known for? He's most known for his challenge and his battle to the death with Morgoth, which to me, I just find this to be so interesting because, albeit he may be the strongest and most valiant elf and the greatest fighter that is part of the Noldor, but you are challenging I'm going to use the lowercase g god here, and I mentioned it earlier. The Morgoth or Melkor is the most powerful created being in all of Ea, and with this was Fingolfin's essentially it was just a wrathful mission because they had just lost at I think it was the Dagor Bragollach, and they had lost a massive amount of Noldoran people. And he basically was just kind of on a wrathful mission and was like, look, I'm going to try to rally and inspire my people by going and challenging Morgoth, knowing that it's pretty much a suicide mission. It's a death mission at this point. But they talk about the fact that Morgoth actually felt fear.
Yeah.
When Fingolfin came to meet him, and likely wouldn't have actually went out, but it talks about the fact that he didn't want to look bad in front of his captains. So I mean, that's kind of a cool thing, but it also mentions that he's the only Vala to feel fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the really interesting thing about this is the fact that they describe how, Fingolfin came in this fury, and it made him look to the point where people thought it was Orome, the one of the Vala, who is known for his steadfastness, his valiance, his strength in battle and things along those lines. And they thought an elf was actually a Vala at that point. And the fight that he puts up is actually, I mean, it's legendary. To me, this would be the coolest fight that you could ever, or battle you'd ever see on film, in my opinion. You've got an elf, a 7-foot tall elf, going against a 21-foot tall Morgoth. I mean, and doing his job. It's cool stuff. And I would have loved to have seen it. But I think that what I take out of this is that, what is kind of that actionable takeaway that we see from Fingolfin. I mean, he looked deep into himself, and he said, I need to find a way to, inspire my my people and rally them. And he knew that, at that point, it's going to require something big. And he wanted to prove that you could put some hurts on a god. And that's what he did. And they talk about the fact that he struck him at least 7 times. In the last one, he struck him in the foot, gave him a limp for all eternity from that point on. And so I think that it was just something that showed valiance, how valiant he was, and it showed a willing to sacrifice for his people. And I think that that's something that I look at to sort of emulate with my children, is that if they ever have a problem, that I would lay down my life for them in an instant. And I think as most fathers, we probably would.
Yeah, I love that. So I actually have never thought about it in that light, in that phrasing. In my mind, I always, reading the story, thought that he did it out of despair. In the Third Age, Gandalf says, like, despair is for those who see no hope, and we do not, or something to that effect. And after the Dagor Bragollach and the Leaguer of Angband being broken, I always thought of that as Fingolfin just giving up and being like, all right, I gotta just do what I can do. I'm fine dying, whatever. I had never thought of it as what he was really doing, like you mentioned, is trying to inspire and prove that it's not worth giving up yet. And so it's kind of the opposite of how I had thought of that in the past, which is an interesting turn of phrase for me, because I thought it's incredibly brave, but it's also just a suicide mission because he doesn't see hope for anything. And I think it's awesome when you phrase it that way, that, like, no, he wanted to show that you could hurt a god, that you could make a difference, and it's worth still fighting. And now you go down the lineage just a little bit, and not even the lineage, just the people that he oversaw, Hurin himself is saying that, it was Hurin, I believe, who says that, like, he hopes to be able to mar Morgoth like my lord Fingolfin did. And so he did create that era of inspiration for all those people.
Yeah. And that was sort of the way that I took that.
I love that.
You do read about it in the sense that, they describe it as wrath and despair. And that is one of the ways that they do describe it in the book, is he came forth in wrath and despair. but I also feel that from that standpoint, he knew that there was still this large remnant. He still had two sons left who needed to, be there from an emotional standpoint, a mental standpoint, that they could lead their people further and inspire them to further greatness.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing that I love too is he wounded Morgoth to the point where Tolkien says Morgoth never came back and set foot in combat again, because of the wounds he received from Fingolfin. So all those things that you mentioned, he was able to achieve. Yeah, he did sacrifice his life, but rather from the perspective I used to have of, it was a suicide mission because he was in despair. No, it was laying his life down to show his people that there's still a fight to be had. I love that.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome back, Samuel.
Sorry, I was grabbing some for Ariel. I've had both headphones in, and I didn't realize she was like, "Hey, I need help." And so
yeah, you're good. Family comes
help
first.
her out. But I kept one in the whole time, so I did get to hear some of those good thoughts. And
so you only half listened to Ariel?
Well, cut that out of the podcast. Make sure to edit that. But no, just one little tidbit before you move on to Elrond here, with Fingolfin, especially the idea of the contrast between despair and hope, and how even though he went with despair, he is still holding on to hope that there will come a day, if he can go out in courage and go first like he did, and even wound Morgoth like that instills hope in his kindred, that instills hope in the elves and the children of Iluvatar to keep the battle going, keep the fight going, which I think is along the lines of what you said, Seth. But that's just a common thread in all of what we see in Tolkien's writing is hope, and I love that. Yeah.
Well, what I'll do, if you don't mind, I'll turn it over to you guys in regards to, like, if you have thoughts on Elrond, things along those lines. I don't want to be just kind of hogging the mic here. This is certainly not something that I want to do.
Well, again, we'll just reiterate, we love it. So don't feel bad about it at all. When it comes to Elrond, I guess I'll just kind of jump off first here with that. I actually made one of the couple of YouTube videos I actually made of like going through somebody's actual story was Elrond, and he is one of my favorite characters in the sense that I like Peter Jackson. I think he did him pretty dirty in the movies. I think they portrayed him well for film, but Elrond's character depth is so much deeper than he's shown. And so as a father, all of these things that I'll kind of run through in very succinct fashion impact him as a father. So his parents, as we briefly discussed, get to Valinor and he's basically orphaned. He's then adopted by the two sons of Feanor. So those two sons of Feanor die. So by the end of the first age, he's had two sets of parents that are no longer there for him. Then he becomes basically second in command. He's adopted by Gil-galad. Scoot forward to the end of the second age, Gil-galad dies. So he's in every age, the first, second, and third age. And by the time he is a father of his own, he's already lost two sets of parents plus an adopted father. And then his wife ends up getting tortured by the orcs, and I'm trying to remember, she doesn't die, but I think she actually somehow goes back to Valinor, if I remember correctly. I might need to be fact checked on that, but I believe that's the case. And so this is somebody that, from the perspective of a father, the only person that he has left is Arwen. And there's this part where Aragorn meets Arwen for the first time and then talks to Elrond. And he basically says, like, often it is that men will hide their greatest treasure or something like that, in reference to Arwen. And it makes perfect sense to me why he would do that.
Well, I mean, he did have one other person, Seth. You're making it a little bit too easy on him. He had his mother-in-law that he obviously, had a thing for, kissing her all those years back, during the Siege of Eregion. So that's canon, right?
Definitely canon. Yes, he made out with Galadriel. My apologies.
Sorry, I had to throw that in
there. Get rid of Payne and McKay. Get rid of Payne and McKay. There we go.
Oh, man.
Sorry, no, you had a very astute and apt analysis of Elrond. I didn't mean to take the attention, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, he's gone through a lot. You're right. He really only has Arwen and Imladris.
He has his sons, I guess, but they're kind of an afterthought in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
they're off doing their own thing.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things about Elrond is that, I mean, when you look at the lineage, I mean, he could have taken the kingship of the Noldor during the Third Age. And, I think it's kind of a testament to his humility to say that, well, because again, if we go down through it, I mean, you've got Turgon, you got Idril, you got Eärendil, and then you got Elros and Elrond. So I mean, he's direct lineage from the king. But I guess that it's I was reading about this. I don't know if you guys have ever read about why he kind of decided not to take kingship. Have you ever read about that? It's an interesting thing. So apparently in Noldoran tradition, it is like a patrimonial society. So it goes down through the male lineage. Turgon not having a male son and going through Idril, that, the matrimonial society on that side, and going through Eärendil and then to Elrond, he felt, apparently it was felt that he may not be the I want to word this correctly. He didn't feel as confident taking the kingship at that point because of his matrilineal kind of going down that line rather. And I also read something that it talks about the fact that Galadriel comes through the Noldoran line also, and she would have had a claim to the kind of overarching coverage of those, like obviously being a queen of her realm too, and that he felt that it was not the best to have them butting heads over that. So it was just, these are just things that, I've read. Who knows how canonical they are, but I thought it was a pretty interesting thing because I don't, I never really thought too much about Elrond at that point being king. He was second in line to Gil-galad, but he also had the ability to be able to take kingship through his mother's side and Turgon. Just kind of a interesting aside there.
That is interesting. So do you think then that Gil-galad, and I know there's debate on this, is the son of Orodreth?
Yeah, that was even Christopher Tolkien says that he doesn't really know who Gil-galad comes through, to be honest. In fact, I was just watching something on that the other day because, my thoughts are, well, where the heck does Gil-galad come from? Who's his father? And then there's some that say he's, son of, I think I've seen somewhere he was son of Turgon or son of Fingon. And then there's others where he's, son of Orodreth, or Orodreth. I get Orodreth and Orofer mixed up occasionally, but son of Orodreth. So, but even I think in Christopher Tolkien's writings, I don't think he says that's one that just is kind of a mystery, if I'm not mistaken. Have you guys heard anything different as to what his lineage is?
Basically just what you said. I'm pretty sure in the Silmarillion, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure in the back he's listed under Orodreth. But like you said, I'm pretty sure Christopher was like, yeah, I don't know that that's how it was supposed to be, but this is how I'm making sense of it. So this is what it is for now.
And Orodreth, does he come through Fingon, or do we know? I can't remember that.
I'm pretty sure it is through Fingon, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I'll kind of retract my statement because I don't know on that. I hate saying stuff that I don't know.
That's fair. Orodreth appears as the second son of Finarfin. Okay.
Huh.
Brother to Finrod. Okay. I do think I remember that, actually, now that I'm reading it.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways. Yeah, so what are your thoughts on Elrond as a father?
You know, I think that the first thing that always pops into mind to me is the picture of Elrond. You know, if you look up pictures of Elrond, you know, sitting with the child, the chieftains of the Dunedain, you know, raising them up from the time that they are, you know, of toddler age to adulthood. I mean, he is stepping in as a surrogate father. You know, this is his brother's lineage, his brother's line. And, you know, he is taking the initiative to be somebody that is the acting surrogate father for all of the chieftains of the Dunedain after, I think it was either Aranarth. I think Aranarth was the first chieftain of the Dunedain after Arvedui. And then Arvedui was the last king, and then Aranarth became the first chieftain of the Dunedain, if I remember correctly. But you know, he's housed them from that time, and you know, really just acted as a surrogate father all the way through. So to me, that shows a depth of love for his brother that, you know, decided to be mortal, decided to, you know, give up immortality and, you know, lead men. So I find that a really compelling aspect of Elrond.
Real quick, I don't want to derail your thought too much because I'm just going to toss this in the pot. It's kind of a weird thought. How many of Aragorn's ancestors had the same conversation about Arwen with Elrond, do you think? Well, because they were all
the
there.
Fact of the matter is, she sounds kind of, yeah. Well, but she spent a great deal of time with Galadriel.
True.
In Lothlorien. But I will say this, that they describe Arwen as the re-embodiment of Luthien, who was considered the most beautiful of all the children of Iluvatar. So I have to say, it'd be tough not to cast some eyes that way. I wouldn't, because I'm married. But
of course not.
You know, it'd be tough.
But the courage to shoot your shot, I mean, that has to come from somebody who's going to be king. Like, I mean, like I don't know. It's fulfillment of full circle. The Return of the King it's just, he's already got that, the riz, as the kids say these days.
That's a fair point.
Instilled.
Yeah. Sorry for derailing. That thought popped into my head and I couldn't keep it in.
You know what? That's great. The funny thing is, I don't know if I've ever really thought about that, but that's spectacular. I love that. So you have to think that, there's going to be a lot of them that come through there that, like you said, shooting your shot. Only one of them can make the basket, though.
That's true. All right, so you're talking about Elrond's great love for, quite frankly, his like nephews from the lineage of his brother, and raising them and being a fatherly figure for them. So yeah, continue with that.
Well, I'm that's pretty much my run of it right there. I just feel like, you know, he's really taken this to a level that you probably don't see a lot of family members willing to do. And I mean, you know, you figure it's been close to, at that point, 6,000 years since he's seen his brother. And, you know, his brother died at 500 years old in the Second Age. And he still holds him dear enough to say, I'm going to take his descendants and I'm going to treat them as if they are my own child. I'm going to rear them. I'm going to bring them up in lore. I'm going to bring them up in healing. And, you know, he's doing all the things that a father needs to do. He's teaching, he's loving, he's nurturing, he's imparting knowledge. All these things are just parts of Elrond that I think are overlooked a little bit in the movies.
100%. Yeah, there's something that I put in my notes for talking about Theoden, but I think it absolutely applies here too. Is this kind of phrase that I talk to my students a lot is, you know, it might not be your fault, but it's probably your responsibility. And, or it's up to you to take on responsibility of something that's not your fault. And so I see that a lot as you're talking through like the fosterling of specifically like just obviously Aragorn, of being that father figure for him when it wasn't his fault that his dad got shot in the eye with an arrow. But he took it on as his responsibility. And that's, for one, just absolute, you know, prime manhood. Like that's as men something we all should strive for, but I think fatherhood especially as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Guys, I'm gonna step off for a second. I'm gonna go grab I'm almost out of battery on my phone here. I'll be right with you. I'll be right
Sounds
back.
good. See, that's how you know we're having a
guys.
good conversation, is when you have to get up to go get a phone battery, because we're pushing the limits.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, he's good. He's good.
Yeah, we sat at a brewery like after, I mean, this was after the party was over and everything, and I had gone over there because Lane and Ed said they might go hang out there, and I got there a little early and nobody was there. I was like, okay, well, I guess we're not gonna have a conversation. And then so I'm like walking back and I see Lane literally drive up and like kind of wave at me, and so I was like, oh, okay, they're still here. I come back and he shows up too, and so I didn't even get to, I didn't really spend any time talking to Lane Nez that entire time. I was just talking with Damion, and it was like, dude, this is like, you need to be on your podcast. You need to impart this knowledge and this lore that you have, because obviously knows his stuff, but just a really easy conversation.
For sure.
But
I'm genuinely jealous that you got to do that. That sounds like such a cool experience, getting to meet all those people and everything.
Yeah, it was super neat.
All right, I've got power.
All right. Wonderful.
Got that eternal flame glowing now.
Yeah, I was gonna say you might get a little glow off me too. Here we go. I'm gonna turn this way some.
That's all good.
There we go.
Perfect.
Any other final thoughts from either of you about Elrond specifically before we jump into the next portion here?
Not from my part. No, I don't think so.
Sweet. Well, seriously, Damion, thank you so much for sharing all that. And honestly, the time you took, you mentioned it as kind of just like, yeah, it's my life, whatever. But like as somebody who's an on-call surgeon and, you know, orthopedic surgeon, you're also writing a textbook, I'm pretty sure is what you told me. Like just, and you have 4 kids.
Yeah.
And like the fact that you were able to make time for this and go as in depth as you did, like, first of all, thank you.
Yes.
But it's also just, again, proves your faithfulness and your passion for Tolkien and his work. So, I think I probably didn't even do mine as in depth as yours here, but I wanted to look a little bit at some of the third age fatherhood of Denethor and Theoden. Seth actually made the notes for Denethor. I thought about doing both of them, and I just focused on Theoden because obviously we see kind of a tragic. Again, going back to there's a lot of stuff that happens in his life that's not his fault, but he takes responsibility for those mishaps. But just kind of some backstory on Theoden, and again, feel free at any point, just raise your hand if you need to interject or anything. But obviously Theoden, we see him as king of Rohan, and his wife dies during childbirth for his only son Theodred. He doesn't remarry. He stays single. He's got a great son, and Theodred actually dies during the Two Towers, which I went back and I read that in the Unfinished Tales. It's actually really, really cool story of how it happens. Obviously in the movies they just didn't have time for it, and they're like, he's dead. And so but I won't go into that for sake of time right now, but it's actually a pretty neat story if you want to go back and read it in the Unfinished Tales. But then because of Éowyn and Éomer's parents both being killed, slain by orcs, Éamund and Theodwyn as their parents, he becomes the foster father of his niece and nephew Éomer and Éowyn. Éomer was 11 at the time, Éowyn was 7, and I think this is interesting. So Éamund was killed by orcs, and Theodwyn dies of grief shortly afterwards. And I was thinking about this as I was writing this up. I think I know Ariel would be sad. I don't think she would die of grief with still having 2 kids to take care of, knowing her love for her boys and her love for me. I think she'd be like, dang, sucks that I lost my husband, but I still got these 2 boys. So I always think that's interesting because that's a theme in Tolkien's world, the mother dying of grief because of the loss of her husband. I mean, we see that in Aragorn and Arwen too. Arwen's just like, okay, I'm done. I have this son that I could continue to live with and spend time with, but I'm done. And so moving on, he's obviously taken under the dark shadow of the scheming of Saruman due to the poor counsel of Grima, goes under this kind of dark shadow, being manipulated. But then obviously he's kind of described as being lost to despair at this point and unable to process the grief of what's going on. Hears about his son's death. He doesn't really understand what to do with that because of the counsel of Grima and the influence of Saruman, until Gandalf comes and kind of lifts the shadow of his mind. Theoden recovers his sanity and his appearance, and he names Éomer his heir, and then kind of confronts the loss of his son. And this is kind of beautifully portrayed in the film, that scene where he's at the tombs, and that one moment that he talks about specifically where it just gets me every time. He's like, no father should have to bury their child. And then he just breaks down crying. Bernard Hill does a fantastic job acting that scene out. And you see him feel it. And he mentions it in the movies, or in the books, excuse me. He mentions the grief of his son. But then he kind of moves on and says, hey, there's work to be done. I understand this now. I need to take responsibility. Again, things that have happened may not be my fault, but they're my responsibility at this point. So kind of plans ahead as they're looking forward to obviously Helm's Deep and then Gondor, and wanting to help out Gondor. He obviously appoints Éowyn as heir in the stead of him and Éomer, and going all the way to his death. Again, we can always circle back if there's anything that you guys want to talk about here in a second, but I wanted to talk about this final, his last words. And it's interesting, in the books it's to Mary. In the movies, Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh decided that he needed to talk to Éowyn, and we needed to see that. I kind of like this better, but both are good. But he's talking to Mary, right after the battle with the Witch King, and Mary's saying, I'm sorry that I came to fight. I went against your counsel. He's asking for forgiveness, and Theoden's last words, he says, "Grieve not, it is forgiven. Great heart will not be denied. Live now in blessedness." And I love this part. "When you sit in peace with your pipe, think of me. For never now shall I sit with you in Mediseld, as I promised, or listen to your herb lore." And then he kind of realizes, oh wait, there's more important things. And it talks about where's Éomer? For my eyes darken, and I would like to see him before I go. He must be king after me, and I would send word to Éowyn. She would have me leave her. Or she would not have me leave her. And now I shall see not her again, dearer than daughter. And so we see him obviously pass away right after this, not even knowing that Eowyn's right there, and close to death herself, which maybe would be even worse for him to know. But I'm curious, like, I mean, obviously we can talk about him as a father here in a second, but just like real quick, what do you guys prefer? Do you prefer what we saw on film with him actually being able to talk to Eowyn and having that interaction? You know, the "I know your face," you know, "you already saved me," the whole like Star Wars line that they reused, or do you kind of like it better him not knowing what had happened?
I'll let you jump in on that one.
Yeah, whoever wants to chime in.
Oh, that's you know, I'm normally somebody who says stay as close to the lore as you possibly can. That's how I usually approach things. I understand that sometimes they have to take a little bit of artistic license to you know, kind of make things flow and make things a little bit more contiguous from the movie standpoint. But I kind of really kind of gravitate towards that discussion that he has with Mary at the end, and I would have liked to have seen that. Now I know where they're coming from, but I just lean towards it staying as close to the lore as possible.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's interesting that you say that too, because you were somebody, from what it sounds like, was your first exposure were the movies. And so a lot of people whose first exposure was the movies, they are okay with the license taken. I know Sam and I's first exposure were the movies. But I think it really is a testament to the work that you've done in diving into Tolkien's work to have that perspective that you prefer the true lore, because the movies flow really well. If you watch them and don't know the actual stories behind it, everything makes sense. It's fantastically done. But you miss the depth of what is in the lore. And to answer Sam's question, from my perspective, I would have loved to see it from Mary's point of view, because to bring this kind of full circle, that moment with Mary is showing what kind of impact Theoden had on Mary, because Mary, I believe like right after this, he says something to the effect of, "You were a father to me for a little while." And he basically was adopted by Theoden, because who else has he got? All his friends, you know, Pippin's in Gondor, Frodo and Sam are gone, Legolas and Gimli and Aragorn are off doing their own thing. Gandalf is with Pippin. He's alone, and he's adopted by Theoden, this father figure. And he even says, like, "I can't smoke a pipe ever again." And then I believe it's Pippin that's like, "Yeah, you're being ridiculous. You think that's what he would want?" And then he's like, "Yeah, you're right. We can smoke a pipe again." But it just shows the impact that he had from that fatherly perspective to Mary.
Yeah, 100%. And it's
great point.
It's a really interesting relationship that you're right. Like with the movies, we don't really need to in the movies in the way that they set it up, but with the extra time that you get to spend in the world, you get to see that with Denethor and Mary and the conversations they had, and the respect that Denethor had for Mary too, of his understanding of this. Well, yeah, what am I saying? Yes, of Theoden had for Mary, but I think it's really cool to hear that. I mean, Mary's a halfling. He doesn't really seem to matter much, and yet Theoden was willing to sit down and smoke with him and hear about his life. He had questions about the halflings. He wanted to know more about him, and just showing him respect and honor and value despite his appearance, which is also a biblical theme you see, obviously with what God tells Samuel as he's anointing David, like, I don't look at the physical appearance, I look at the heart. And obviously that's something reiterated with Mary specifically. And I found out too, Mary, not necessarily Mary from like the Bible, but Mary, Merry, it actually means courage. It means to have like courage and strength and stuff. So I think that's kind of neat. But
that's fitting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I did not know that either.
It was a sermon from our church, God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. He was going through like the lines of that song, and it's actually like, this isn't just a bunch of like British redcoats like, hey ho ho, like let's be merry. It's like, no, like, God bring rest to these soldiers, these fighters, these guys who've had to like have courage and through this. And so it's like, oh, there's a lot of deep, more depth to it. And obviously Tolkien probably knew that. That's why he named him Merry. I always was just like, that's kind of an odd name for a male to have, but yeah, courage and strength. So
Yeah.
like that's kind of what I had on Theoden. Obviously, there's not a whole lot on his relationship with Theodred. Obviously, he probably he made him like a kind of like a prince of the Mark. He was a marshal of the Mark, and so they went to battle together. And he really had to grow up fast. Theodred did, and so sure they spent a lot of time before kind of the corruption of his mind through Grima, but the responsibility and the respect that even through that span of time that Éomer and Éowyn had for him also speaks volumes to his willingness to be like a father to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Are you cool if I move on to Denethor from my perspective then, Sam? You good?
Yes, please do. Please do.
All right, awesome. So this is kind of interesting. When we were picking this topic, I initially, kind of going off of what Damien's thought process was, I was like, oh, Fenway would be a really cool character to do. And then Sam mentioned that you were going to go through the lines of the Noldorian lines. And so I was like, okay, I'll let him have that. And then I was like, oh, Elrond's kind of that. That'd be a good one. I was like, nah, I'll leave that. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to do Theoden. And then I opened the doc and Sam is already talking about Theoden. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll take the opposite and go with a father figure that is actually not somebody that is well understood in the movies, but has depth to him. And kind of like Feanor, you can understand his perspective, but that doesn't make it right. And so that's why ultimately I went with Denethor, who... if you're unaware, Denethor is the father to Boromir and Faramir. He's the 26th ruling steward of Gondor. He is the son of Ecthelion II, which, side note, I love that these names are recycled, because whenever I hear the name Ecthelion, I think of Ecthelion of the Fountain of Gondolin, who fought off a Balrog and allowed Tuor to escape. That's where my mind goes. So I love the recycling of names. But in his younger years, Denethor, and so when you think of him as a father and the way he treats his two sons, picture yourself in his shoes from a young age. He, being the son of Ecthelion, fought in many battles and wars alongside this person named Thorongil. He didn't know who Thorongil was. Perhaps he could guess a little bit, but he learned that his father favored Thorongil over him. And the people of Gondor started to favor Thorongil over him. Thorongil, of course, ends up being Aragorn. It's just an alias that he's using. And so from the perspective of Denethor, he's always playing second fiddle growing up. He's never measuring up to this person that he doesn't even know or trust, because he's like, that's not really your name. I know you're more than this. And then Thorongil just disappears. And so he becomes steward eventually after his father dies. And in the back of his mind, he's always worried that somebody is going to try to come and usurp him, because he saw it firsthand that this Thorongil character was more beloved to not only his people, but his father. And so he's already got this sense of loathing towards Thorongil, who was always whispering in Ecthelion's ear to trust Gandalf. And so that kind of pits Denethor against Gandalf due to his lack of trust for Thorongil. So I know there's a lot of like pieces moving there, but it was said, and I think it was Appendix A, where people really didn't trust Denethor at first, but he really did prove to become a really steadfast ruler. And it says, when Denethor became steward, he proved a masterful lord, holding the rule of all things in his own hand. He said little, he listened to counsel, and then followed his own mind, which, as a father, as a ruler, these are actually good attributes to have. Holding the rule of all things in your hand, you're the buck stops with you. And then speaking little, he's listening, which means he's listening a lot. So he's listening, but then at the end of the day, the decision rests with him. And so that's how he ruled, where he would listen, but at the end of the day, he was going to do what he was, what he thought was best. And so with that, he decided that he wanted to broach the Arnor stone. This is one of the Palantiri that we discussed earlier that was probably locked away in a place where nobody had touched it, almost forgot about it, but he decided that he was going to use it. He wanted to be able to gain the wisdom and foresight that came with that. And he also wanted to use that stone in a sense because he was scared of Aragorn and Gandalf, and he wanted to see if he could keep an eye on preventing them from usurping his throne, or supplanting him is probably the more proper term. And so with that, Gandalf later explains that he thinks that Sauron only allowed Denethor to see what Sauron wanted, which helped lead towards this despair. But in using the Palantir, it was said that a masterful man, both wise and learned beyond a measure of those days, and strong-willed, confident in his own powers, and dauntless. And so that stone elevated him past other stewards or other rulers of his same station. With that, you take that whole section, and then you take his relationship with his wife, Finduilas, which, just a quick side note, if you have the name Finduilas and you marry her, or she's interested in you, you should do everything in your power to keep her alive, because bad things happen to people that let go of Finduilas, i.e. Turin. So,
yeah.
But with that, Finduilas actually was from Dol Amroth, which is a city. It's a Gondorian city right on the sea. And Tolkien basically says, following the same theme of, Indus and what was Theoden's wife's name?
Theodwin. Oh no, sorry, that was his wife's. That was his sister's name. It was like Endhel.
Or no, that's who I meant. His sister's name. Regardless, like the passing away of weariness, basically. Finduilas ultimately dies because she misses the sea and the open air and the freedom, and she can't stand being in the walls of stone that Minas Tirith provides. And so with that, it's said that Denethor became much more grim after this occurred. And she died when Boromir was 12 and Faramir was 7. So 2 brothers, 5 years apart. Sam and I were brothers. Let's see, we're 4 years apart, right? Yeah. 4? Yeah, 4 years apart.
Yeah. 4. Yeah.
And honestly, that age gap wasn't horrible.
You have a lot more gray hairs, so it seems like it's older, but
that's
4
fair.
years.
That's fair.
Here we go.
But basically, they're at the age where Faramir probably is looking up to Boromir more than trying to compete with him. But that's not really the way his father sees it. With the death of Finduilas, Denethor just pours all his love, exactly like Dr. Damion talked about with Fenway and Feanor. He pours all his love into Boromir, and Faramir just kind of gets left off, just kind of forgotten. So Faramir takes up with Gandalf, basically studying under him, learning as much as he can, and this really bothers Denethor because, as we talked about previously, Denethor has no trust for Gandalf because he expects him to try to supplant him at some point. And so you can see all these different mechanisms working within Denethor's brain. One of the good excerpts of his character that I found was when traveling to Minas Tirith, Gandalf's talking to Pippin, and he's describing him, and he says, "He is not as other men of his time, Pippin, and whatever be his descendant from father to son, by some chance, the blood of Westerness runs nearly true in him, as it does in his other son, Faramir, and yet did not in Boromir, whom he loved the best. He has long sight, he can perceive, if he bends his will thither, much of what is passing in the minds of men, even those that dwell far off. It is difficult to deceive him and dangerous to try." And so you can see what kind of power Denethor actually had. I know Peter Jackson kind of portrays him as just kind of this withering old man that's going crazy because he's looking into the Palantir. But that's not the case. He really is a powerful ruler. But kind of like we talked about, the faults of the father pouring all his love into Boromir. It's because he trusted Boromir more than Faramir. Like we said, Faramir is a wizard's pupil. Those are Denethor's words. But Boromir, he knew, would do whatever he deemed best for himself first off, Denethor second, and then Gondor third. Whereas Faramir is seeing the bigger picture because of his tutelage under Gandalf. And so that whole interaction that you see in the movies between Denethor and Faramir is really good. But in the books, I'll just read a couple of quotes because it really explains kind of their relationship. And so after letting Frodo and Sam go, Faramir's talking to Denethor and he said, "If what I have done displeases you, my father, I wish I had known your counsel before the burden of so weighty a judgment was thrust upon me." And in those words, you can hear that like Faramir did what he knew was best, but at the same time, he still wants his father's affirmation. He wants to hear his father say, "You made the right choice. I know that's a hard choice. You made the right choice." But he just doesn't get that from Denethor. Denethor just turns around and looks at him and says, "Would that have availed to change your judgment? You still would have done just so, I deem. I know you well. Ever you desire to appear lordly and generous as a king of old, gracious and gentle. That may well befit one of high race who sits in power and peace, but in desperate hours gentleness may be repaid with death." And then the famous line of, "You wish that I had died and Boromir had lived." And so you can see how the family dynamics of Boromir and Faramir actually getting along very well, but Denethor always picking Boromir and trusting Boromir really impacts Faramir as a son. And kind of like Dr. Damion was describing with Feanor and all those negative attributes that he has, the anger, the brashness, the pride, you see all those things in Boromir too. And so you really see a contrast in the two sons based on the way they were parented by Denethor. So there's a little bit more in there, but ultimately Denethor's fear and despair really that came from looking in the stone really prevented him from seeing the wisdom in Faramir's actions, and it made him incapable of trusting allies that weren't directly under his rule, like Gandalf or Aragorn or Theoden, who he didn't believe would actually show up. And ultimately that led to his despair led to the ending of his own life, jumping off the citadel and Minas Tirith holding the stone. And I forget exactly how it's phrased, but it was said that if anyone were to look in the stone, they would just see old hands withering in flames. And so I thought that was just a very interesting contrast between especially Theoden, who is kind of the counterpart to Denethor, and how he adopted the son being Éomer, and then also Éowyn and Merry, and was a good fatherly figure compared to Denethor, who was kind of the opposite. So yeah, I know I just rambled for a very long time, but take it away.
One thing that sticks out to me is the difference in reaction to the death of the son. And so obviously Theoden, he only had one son. Theoden loses Theoden, his only son, and he griefs it, he mourns it, and then he moves on to take responsibility for his people. He still holds on to the responsibility of the kingship. And Denethor, I mean, I think about I'm in my situation, like I have Beren and I have Elisar, and if Beren, God forbid, were to pass away, like I wouldn't look at Elisar any different. I wouldn't be like, oh, I wish he just were more like Beren. Like, no, I would want to pour even more love into him. Kind of that same idea of like the Finwë Feanor perspective there. But at the same time, Denethor, his grief, he takes that on with the despair of the stone, the combination of the two, because they didn't have a stone, so he didn't have the despair of what was already kind of happening. And so, I mean, Denethor, he's completely hopeless at this point, and doesn't see his son Faramir as somebody who's beneficial to help in the situation at hand. And so he kind of just deems him as like not invaluable, or like not valuable, but like just not beneficial. And then even trying to again take Faramir's life with him, of like, no, you're coming with me. Like, I don't know what is about to happen. Like, you're coming with me, and that's just, it's a twisted, unfortunately, very twisted and depressing and deeply saddening story for Denethor, that he had to go through it this way. And something else that sticks out to me is there's a lot of single dads out there in Middle Earth struggling. And so I can't imagine without having that female counterpart. Like, Ariel does so much for our boys. I love being a dad. You know, I'm at work the majority of the time that they're alive, unfortunately. Like, it's just how things work. Like, I see them at night and the weekends. And so she does so much, and to not have that, I'm sure, is just an added layer to the situation. But those are kind of my thoughts off the top of my head. I'd love to hear from you, Dr. Damion.
Well, I can tell you from listening to both of you, the discussion on both Theoden and Denethor, I can tell you I took things out of there that I had not thought of before, to be quite honest. So no, it was amazing to hear all of that. You know, I think that as we look at, you know, just the counterpoint between Theoden and Denethor, I think, first of all, Bernard Hill in those movies, one of the most amazing portrayals I've ever watched before. As he's giving, I use the word soliloquy, but he gives that soliloquy when he's at Helm's Deep and Hama's, you know, putting on his armor, and, you know, at the end, it's just you see the light, you see the shadow, and then at the end when he says, you know, how did it come to this? That to me is one of the most powerful portrayals I've ever watched in any movie, in my opinion. So I mean, amazing job there. But you know what we see out of Theoden is, you know, this kind of dichotomy between, you know, you lose your son, you lose your namesake. I mean, you think about, you know, that'll be the last of his line, and, you know, just the amount of heartbreak that, you know, would come from that, and the feeling of despair. You know, we described Fingolfin's level of despair that goes along with that. But I think that Theoden does just such a great job of, you know, kind of developing the relationship with Éowyn and Éomer to, you know, allow them just to be a part of, you know, what this, you know, proud people and proud tradition are. And I just think he does a great job of that, you know. And then we kind of look at what happens with Denethor, and I kind of think, I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of what and I don't say this very often, I'm not a huge fan of what Peter Jackson did with Denethor in the movies. You know, the discussion of Denethor is like, just like Seth pointed out, I mean, this was a man that was impressive. And they said if you put he and Gandalf beside each other, that you would expect that Denethor was the wizard and Gandalf was the you know, the steward. He had that look to him. He had an ability to be able to, you know, read people, read and understand things that nobody else could. So I feel like they really kind of did him a little bit dirty there. I won't even bring up Faramir because I think that's probably the worst of them.
Yeah.
But from the standpoint, I think that, you know, the portrayal of him, not the actor that portrayed him didn't do a wonderful job. I just think that sometimes the writing, the dialogue, the interactions, things like that don't do justice to what that character provided in the book. And you know, it's I think something that, as a sort of how Denethor thought, you know, they put in the they put in the movies about the fact that he would not, he would not be supplanted by this Ranger of the North. Well, there was a time in the books when Boromir asks him what, how many generations has to go on before, we're named king.
Yeah.
And he basically comes out and says, well, it would take 10,000 generations before, we could even claim to have that type of blood to be able to take over as king. So he understands that, the race of the men of the Númenóreans that came and were the kings of Gondor, that was a higher level. And he understood that. And, he had that explanation to Boromir. And I gained so much respect from, listening to that, because again, all you get out of the movies is that portrayal and that dialogue that you see. And I think he was just a much more nuanced character than was portrayed in the book, or actually in the movies.
Yeah, which is very true for almost all of Tolkien's characters. When even just reading through the first time, you don't even get that unless you read the appendices or some of the unfinished tales. And like the depth of Tolkien's writings, I think there's a reason that there is a little bit of a, I guess, like a learning curve, or people just get daunted by it, because it does take time. It takes multiple rereads. It takes, a deep understanding to see what he was ultimately creating. And that is character depth to the point of bewilderment for me, for all these different characters. How in the world, I mean, granted, you don't have iPhones and you're spending 30-40 years doing this, sure, but at the same time, each of these characters just have such depth to them that on the surface you just don't even realize.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, it's a reason he's the author of the millennia, of not just the century anymore. It's unmatched. And the fact that we've been spending almost 3 hours here talking about just a handful of characters. It's funny, people, when they hear I have a podcast that has been going on for 3 years now, a little over 3 years now, and there was like, wait, how are you still finding stuff to talk about? I'm like, you have no idea. you have no idea how much there is to talk about. But man, this has been incredible. I'll just say, just real quick, like, obviously, it's 11 o'clock. It's far past my bedtime, but I'm so glad that I stayed up for this. This was absolutely incredible. Just any final thoughts? I'll start with you, Damion, just about any of our characters or fatherhood in general, or anything kind of last thing you'd like to share before we hit the bed.
Well, really nothing profound. Just, what? I mean, it's hard. But it is by far the most rewarding thing that you can do. And from my standpoint, I've made an absolute ton of mistakes in fathering, but I'm hoping that I can remedy them, correct them, and be the father to my kids that they need, that can look up and say, hey, this is, my dad's a godly man. He leads me in the right direction. He acts as a good role model. And, I know that I don't always do that. I'm a son of Adam. I'm a fallible guy. And, I think we're all like that, and we all come out of it feeling like we've failed. Look at it, even Tolkien felt that. And I sit there and think of, well, man, this guy wrote, hundreds of letters to his children. I mean, he's got to be a great father. He thought he failed. So I think we're allowed to have a little bit of that in the back of our minds. But really, as long as you're pouring all your love into your children, that it's going to work out.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. It's being, I reference my wife often on this podcast, but one of her most profound things she's ever said to me is, when we became parents, that everything in your life levels up. Your happiness levels up, your joy levels up, your frustration levels up, your anger levels up, your pride in your children. Your life just elevates in a way that is hard to describe. And I think that's honestly what Dr. Damion is describing, is that it really is the joy of our lives, but that also means that we're human and we are going to make mistakes. And I'll just echo what he said. I've made plenty, and I will continue to do so. But the ultimate goal is just to lead through love, and raise our children a little bit better than we were raised. And we had a great father. If we can just make slight improvements on every generation, down the road, our kids and great grandkids and all that stuff will be great. So, last thing I want to say is just thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for imparting your wisdom on us, the advice that you've given us. Your love for Tolkien really shines through. And like I mentioned earlier, it is so much fun to have somebody else pop in from time to time that has that same deep understanding of these topics and these characters. And like you said, it's an escape, and it's an escape that Sam and I, living away from our families, living away from each other, use often. And it's just been a pleasure to have you on. So thank you for spending the last 3 hours with us and talking some Tolkien.
Well, I will say this has been just an amazing time for me again. I don't get a chance to go this in depth that often. And it was really, this was really a pleasure for me to be here. And, I see what you two have in regards to this, and how that this bonds you and allows you to be able to, take the time to, actually sit down and be very cognizant of the fact that this is a binder between you two. And it allows you to come together, and it allows you to discuss, and it allows you to have something to, really fold into the mix. And I just think that's a really beautiful thing. And, as I kind of, one last thing you had mentioned, you mentioned your wife a lot on that, you're on your podcast. Well, my wife and I, we have our 28th anniversary in 2 days. And honestly, without her, thank you, I appreciate that. Without her, none of this happens. Yeah. I'd like to say that I'm the spiritual leader of our family. It's her. She binds this family together, and basically, I can't even begin to throw enough superlatives at her. So, having a loving wife is an amazing thing, and it helps you be a better father. So,
couldn't agree more.
But kind of to go back, thank you for having me on here. It really was a pleasure.
Dude, it was our pleasure, really. And again, when we were sitting there at that brewery just after, late night, and I was telling Seth as you went to grab your charger, it's like, obviously I was there. I was interested in getting to talk to Lane and Ez a bit more and just hear from them. But I mean, we just sat down, we started talking, and I could care less. I mean, I love Lane and Ez, and Lane said he was very excited to hear this. We were chatting offline. He was really excited about hearing this episode. So if you're listening, I do care about you. But just the conversation we had, I was like, there's no way that I'm not going to leave this opportunity without a further relationship, and also just blessing our listeners too with your knowledge and with your thoughts and stuff. So. Yeah, really appreciate you, man. Thanks for staying up with us. You don't have a 5 a.m. procedure. Somebody's not gonna you're not gonna slip because you're tired. You do. Okay.
I got a few surgeries tomorrow.
All right. Well, I'm sure you're used to a little sleep, and hopefully we're not on any insurance claims or anything like that. Totally kidding. Dude, thank you again so much. I think the last thought that I have just kind of on fatherhood is, you guys hit the nail on the head. There's just, for me, obviously being incredibly flawed, just pointed to the king, is all that I would give as if I was giving any advice, but also knowing our enemy, our real enemy, Satan, he hates good fathers. You look at just what's happening in our world right now with toxic masculinity, the idea that, fathers, men being strong father figures, strong spiritual leaders of your home, like how that's kind of like viewed as like a bad thing nowadays. And there's a war on fatherhood, really. I genuinely feel that. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to even have this conversation, not just because it's very interesting, but also because I think it's something that we, as people who are doing our best to be good, godly fathers, it's kind of a way to fight against that. Because, Scripture tells us the enemy is prowling around like a roaring lion waiting to devour. And so we have to stay vigilant as fathers. We can't be passive. We learn from people like what we've talked about, like the passivity or the anger or just the ways the enemy, Satan, uses our insecurities, our weaknesses to make generational damage happen. And so this was a lot more than just a fun conversation. This was, for me at least, it was really kind of a powerful way of staying vigilant and hearing from two people that I deeply respect. So appreciate you both. Without further ado, I think Gondor needs a call for aid at this point. 11:15. This is a part of the podcast where we break in the halls of Medicel and shout, Gondor calls for aid. Will you, Rohan, answer those of you who've listened this long into the podcast? If you enjoyed it, please light a beacon of your own by sharing it with fellow friends and fans. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. We're also over on YouTube as well. If you want to share your Tolkien story with us, you can share that. You can email it to us to wecpodcast@gmail.com. Again, gosh, such a pleasure to have Dr. Damion here on our podcast. He's definitely a member of the fellowship now. The last thing that I'll leave you guys with this final farewell is a letter that Tolkien wrote to Michael, letter 244, because this is December 18th as we're recording this. So he tells Michael, well, here comes Christmas, the astonishing thing that no commercialism can in fact defile, unless you let it. I hope, my dearest, that it will bring you some rest and refreshment in every way. That is my encouragement to you, gentlemen, and to everyone listening. Merry Christmas. We bid you all a very fond farewell.